Chapter 1157, A New Age. Chapter 1157, A New Age. Boom, boom, boom. Ling Han continued his frenzied attack on Wu Zhe. He was hellbent on defeating him and making him open his mouth to admit defeat. He owed this to the Rain Emperor. However, he had to admit that seeds were indeed supreme prodigies. Wu Zhe was a king tier among the seeds, so he was naturally incredibly powerful. Ling Han had cultivated each major tier to a state of perfection, but he wasn't the only person in the world who had achieved this. At least, Wu Zhe was also a prodigy who had achieved this. If Ling Han hadn't formed 5 mountains and rivers, he would have been a mere sandbag before Wu Zhe, regardless of how prodigious he was. Now, however, there was no significant difference in strength between them. However, Ling Han possessed a physique that made him truly invincible against those at the same cultivation level as him. This was a massive advantage, and it allowed him to attack with more freedom and less worry. In other words, he could place more of his focus and energy into attacking. On the other, Wu Zhe was indeed able to wound Ling Han after activating a secret technique, yet he definitely wouldn't be able to maintain this level of offense. The two of them exchanged blows, and both of them shed blood. Heavens! Mountain river tier cultivators can actually become this powerful. Compared to them, it's as if I'm a weak cultivator who still hasn't reached the mountain river tier yet. I definitely have to form 5 mountains and rivers. Everyone clasped their heads and exclaimed in shock. Meanwhile, many people decided that they wouldn't break through to the Sun-Moon tier unless they formed 5 mountains and rivers. This had a significant influence on the Majestic Heaven sect, as sometime in the future, several people from this cohort did indeed manage to form 5 mountains and rivers. However, many more people remained stuck at the mountain river tier for life, not even being able to reach the Sun-Moon tier. After all, forming 5 mountains and rivers was tremendously difficult, even for seed-level prodigies. Ling Han roared ferociously as he unleashed his own sword Dao. Not only was the combination of the fast technique and the sword of the great Dao quick, but it also possessed a devastating destructive ability. This was his own Dao, and he had named it the lightning sword technique. He had chosen the word lightning as it represented the fastest speed in the world. In addition, the might of lightning was also extremely terrifying. This was analogous to his own Dao. Moreover, just like how the Rain Emperor's Son of Heaven Fist technique would evolve along with the elevation of his cultivation level, the might of the lightning sword technique would also increase along with the elevation of Ling Han's cultivation level. This was because the lightning sword technique wasn't a fixed technique. Rather, it was a type of intent realm and a technique that displayed one's comprehension of the great Dao. Shua, shua, shua. It was as if Ling Han had become one with his divine demon sword, and the might of his lightning sword technique was elevated to an all-new height. Wu Zhe grunted in exertion. He had already been on the ropes just then, when Ling Han still hadn't retrieved his god tool yet. So, how could his situation have improved now that Ling Han was wielding his divine demon sword? This was a god tool that had been nurtured by Ling Han, and thus it was connected to his heart and mind. As such, Ling Han could maximize the might of this god tool. Wu Zhe was forced onto his back foot, and he eventually went from returning 5 strikes for every 10 strikes to returning 1 strike for every 10 strikes. Although he hadn't lost in the sense of the word yet, everyone knew that he had, in fact, already lost. He had lost, and there was not a single excuse to make. He and Ling Han were at the same cultivation level, and his strength was clearly inferior. Everyone remained silent. However, there was excitement on many people's faces. Wu Zhe and the others had already occupied the positions of king tier for far too long. It was about time for the next generation to step up and usurp their positions. And the person who had fired the first shot was none other than Ling Han. The new disciples of the sect had all arrived with big dreams and ambitions. Upon witnessing Ling Han's might, their confidence all increased 100-fold. They yearned to reach the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier, as doing so would allow them to challenge even replace the older generation of king tiers, just as Ling Han had. Ling Han's battle was a prelude that opened the curtains to a new age. After several more exchanges, Wu Zhe was sent flying by a strike from Ling Han's sword. A gaping wound was cut into his chest, and it would have been even more serious had Ling Han not had mercy on him. In fact, he would have been cut into two at the waist. This was only a spar, and Ling Han was only seeking justice for the Rain Emperor. The two of them weren't archenemies who were hell-bent on fighting to the death. However, Wu Zhe had been defeated before all the other seeds, so it was reasonable to assume that he would hate Ling Han's guts from this moment on. Wu Zhe stared daggers at Ling Han before angrily turning around and leaving. He paid no attention to the fact that this gathering still had yet to conclude. Junior brother Wu, where are the tea leaves? Ling Han asked with a chuckle. Since enmity had already been bred between them, he didn't mind making it even worse. Wu Zhe paused mid-step. He then tossed 10 sparkling and crystal-like tea leaves down without so much as a glance back. This was none other than the 10 pieces of serene poplar tea leaves that he had promised. However, he had tossed them toward He Tao, not Ling Han. He continued to stride away, and he quickly descended from the mountain peak and disappeared into the lingering clouds and mists that surrounded the mountain. Ling Han clapped his hands indifferently as he returned to his seat. He shut his eyes, and it appeared as if he were napping. His expression was relaxed, yet this caused a strong sense of wariness to grip He Tao and the other King Tiers' minds. In terms of battle prowess alone, he was genuinely not much stronger than Wu Zhe. However, he possessed the divine demon sword, which was an immensely powerful god tool. Even though it wasn't a level 4 god tool yet, it was already starting to display an overwhelming might. Moreover, he possessed an astounding physique that allowed him to disregard a significant portion of his opponent's attacks. However, were there secret techniques or god tools that could threaten his physique? At least, his physique wouldn't be undefeatable before he reached the level of Saint King. In any case, one couldn't underestimate the Six Kings just because one of their members had lost a battle. If they were forced into a life-and-death battle, who knew how many trump cards they could unleash? Who knew what kind of terrifying power they could summon? Of course, Ling Han was only being vigilant and cautious. He still maintained the belief that he was invincible at the same cultivation level. There was a look of zeal on Ding Ping's face as he looked at his master. His master was far too powerful. This was his master, someone who could always surprise and shock others. People had said that he didn't have the right to enter the majestic heavens sect before, yet he had instantly jumped out and proved them wrong. People had said that the Six Kings were invincible just then, yet Wu Zhe had been clinically and ruthlessly disposed of. He definitely had to follow the example of Ling Han. He didn't yearn to surpass him. He merely wished that he wouldn't lose face for his master and bring disrepute to his mighty name. The sparring matches continued. However, after witnessing the mighty battle between Ling Han and Wu Zhe, the ensuing battles all seemed boring to the extreme. The spectators were all bored, and as a result, those who were sparring also became bored. It wasn't long before no one else stepped up to battle. The seed-level prodigies started to discuss their understandings of cultivation. Those gathered here were all supreme prodigies, though it was still impossible for them to be perfect in every single aspect. Rather, they each had their own strengths and weaknesses. Thus, they frequently nodded in agreement, even if they were only listening to the unique views of someone at the low extreme. The atmosphere became increasingly lively, and none of them kept their understandings a secret from others. Of course, things like secret techniques definitely wouldn't be shared with others. Doing so wouldn't be generous. It would be incredibly foolish. Ling Han also learned a lot. His lightning sword technique was based on the understanding and destruction of the Great Tao, and thus the comprehension of others also provided him with ideas and inspiration. He generously shared some of his understandings as well, though he obviously didn't share his core understandings, such as the lightning sword technique. Hee, the water has finished boiling. Let's drink some tea, He Tao said with a smile. Wisps of steam were finally drifting out from the small teapot. However, the steam strangely didn't dissipate. Instead, it formed into all kinds of mysterious shapes. As expected of divine water, the contents of this teapot were as valuable as an entire city. Chapter 1158. Arrival of Yang Hao. Chapter 1158. Arrival of Yang Hao. In some sense, He Tao and Wu Ji were actually quite decent people. At least, they had both offered genuinely good and valuable treasures to share with their junior brothers and sisters. If Wu Ji hadn't been too insistent on winning and used shady techniques against the Rain Emperor, Ling Han wouldn't have challenged and humiliated him. Only after asking around did Ling Han learn that the other 4 king tiers had all gone out to explore and train. In reality, the disciples of the Majestic Heaven sect all had fairly good relationships with each other. If the seniors obtained valuable items during their adventures, they would take them out to share with the newer disciples of the sect. This was a tradition. When the other 4 king tiers returned, they would also share some valuable treasures with Ling Han and the others. Such practice was repeated generation after generation, and it had already become a good tradition of the sect. Everyone picked the 10 most outstanding individuals of the Tao discussing segment. These 10 cultivators would enjoy an extra serene poplar tea leaf in their tea. Ling Han was naturally chosen as one of the 10. If he couldn't qualify for the top 10, who could? The Rain Emperor also had the honor of being chosen as one of the top 10. However, Ding Ping didn't win this honor. He had lost to Lan Luan, and regardless of the reason, a defeat was a defeat. In any case, it had revealed that his mental state still wasn't up to scratch yet. He Tao walked over and asked, "Brother Han, are you interested in exploring an ancient land?" Ling Han smiled and said, "What kind of ancient land could this be?" "It's most likely a large sect from the distant past. It appears as if the sect was destroyed, though many valuable items still remain at the site." He Tao replied with a serious expression. He knew that he wouldn't be able to convince Ling Han if he didn't reveal some information of substance. "Being as powerful as brother he is, there's no need for you to invite me, is there?" Ling Han said. He Tao chuckled and said, "There's a treasure storage, and it can only be opened by the combined power of 7 people. Moreover, these 7 people all have to be at the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier." Ling Han was astonished upon hearing this. There's such a high bar for opening up a treasure storage? This ancient sect must have been super impressive. The Majestic Heaven sect had gathered all of the most brilliant prodigies from the 100 or so nearby planets, yet only 7 of the newest generation of disciples had succeeded in forming 5 mountains and rivers. "I guess I can go then." Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, "When are we setting off?" He didn't ask where the ancient land was, as that would be far too insincere and insensitive. He Tao laughed heartily and said, "There's no hurry. This ancient land is actually controlled by our sect. In fact, it's a mystery realm that opens once every 100 years. However, it's close to opening again, and we'll probably be able to set off within the next half of a year." To immortal beings, half a year was indeed a very short time. The sect has wanted to open that treasure storage for a long time, yet there are strict requirements for who can open and enter it. To be more precise, one must be at the mountain river tier. However, only 6 of us were at the pinnacle level of the mountain river tier before, so we could only sigh in disappointment every time we passed by that treasure storage. If it weren't for this treasure storage, Shinjuer, Shirangwa, and Wu Wentong could all have broken through to the Sun-Moon tier several decades ago. However, they held on to the hope that they could one day enter this treasure storage, and it was because of this hope that they suppressed their cultivation level. They're planning to break through to the Sun-Moon tier after exploring this treasure storage. Hee, the heavens have carried out the desire of man. Now that Brother Han has joined, there's a large chance that we'll finally be able to open that treasure storage. Ling Han was astonished, and he said, "So, what you're saying is that Shenjuer, Shirangwa, and Wu Wentong have all reached a state of perfection in the mountain river tier already?" Gasp! They possessed a power that could surpass 10 stars. In other words, their power was on par with cultivators at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. He Tao smiled faintly and said, "Indeed, these 3 have already perfected the mountain river tier. Huang Peishan formed his 5th river a dozen or so years ago, but I'm unsure as to whether he's perfected the mountain river tier yet. After forming a 5th mountain, one's power would surpass 7 stars. After cultivating the 5th mountain to a state of perfection, one's power would surpass 8 stars. And, after forming a 5th river, one's power would surpass 9 stars. Ling Han was especially curious, and he asked, "What about brother He?" He. A smile appeared on He Tao's face, and he paused for a moment before saying, "I'm a bit behind the 4 of them. I only formed my 5th river a few days ago." Gasp! His power had surpassed 9 stars. In comparison to the other king tiers, Wu Zhe was the weakest. His 5th mountain definitely hadn't reached a level of perfection yet. Otherwise, his power should have been enough to overwhelm Ling Han, not just be slightly higher. As expected of king tiers, so powerful. Ling Han hadn't dared to underestimate the 6 kings to begin with. Now that he heard He Tao's introduction, he naturally held them in an even higher regard. However, this didn't mean that he would venerate or fear them. He had his own trump cards, after all, so there was no need for him to be fearful or overly cautious. Everyone continued to drink tea and discuss Tao. This was good tea brewed with good water, and this caused everyone to become immersed in the great Tao. The prodigious nature of those present became clear at this moment as divine light started to exude from almost everyone's body. Even the regulations of the great Tao could be seen, and this was naturally thanks to the effects of the serene poplar tea. However, there were also exceptions, such as Ling Han. There was no sign of divine light on his body. There was nothing he could do about this. He had drunk reincarnation tea before, so how could mere serene poplar tea have any significant effect? There was no divine light on Ling Han, nor was there any on He Tao. He had either drunk this tea before, or he had drunk tea with even better effects. Tea such as serene poplar tea would be most effective the first time one drank them. Afterward, its effects would decrease with each increasing time it was drunk. The 2 of them exchanged a glance, and both of them smiled. At the same time, they both held each other in even higher regard. Wang! A devastating aura suddenly swept through the peak, and it was as if a demon god were descending into the world. A cold chill gripped at everyone's heart. Who is this? Everyone was stunned. This was an important peak of the majestic heaven sect, so who could swagger over here to show off their might? This thought had barely crossed their minds when a male in white walked over, his hands clasped behind his back. He was a stunningly handsome male, with his complexion as clear as jade and his body slender and tall. This was the kind of male who could elicit shrieks from fangirls with a single glance cast in their direction. Lord Yang! Many people instantly shouted in astonishment. Even though they were seeds, there was still a deep sense of fear and respect on their faces when they saw this young man. Yang Hao, a prodigy among prodigies. He had reached the Sun-Moon tier after a mere 600 years of cultivation, and he was more so invincible against those at the same cultivation level. The other prodigies were merely his stepping stones. They were side characters whose existence was to highlight his might. What cultivation level was he at right now? No one knew. However, they knew that he had definitely improved in leaps and bounds. The Sun-Moon tier and Mountain River tier were 2 completely different tiers. Even if one reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier, they would only be able to challenge the weakest of the weak Sun-Moon tier cultivators. Many people stood up and bowed respectfully to Yang Hao, saying, "Our respects to Lord Yang." In the Majestic Heaven sect, those at a higher cultivation level were all referred to as Lord rather than Senior or Master. He Tao remained silent. He was about to perfect the Mountain River tier, and breaking through to the Sun-Moon tier would be especially easy for a prodigy like him. Thus, he didn't respect or fear Yang Hao much. However, strength was the most important attribute in the cultivation world, so he would remain a peg lower than Yang Hao as long as he didn't advance to the Sun-Moon tier. Thus, he wouldn't actively provoke Yang Hao. A domineering aura radiated from Yang Hao, and he was like a demon lord who people could only kowtow and gaze up to. He swept his gaze across the peak before saying calmly, "Which of you is Han Lin?" Chapter 1159, Battle to the End. Chapter 1159, Battle to the End. Which of us is Han Lin? Yang Hao came to look for Han Lin. Many people were unclear about the situation. They thought that Yang Hao had come to invite Ling Han to join his side after hearing about his victory over Wu Zhe. However, People like Gan Shiyun knew that Yang Hao definitely hadn't come to ask Ling Han to join his side. Gan Shiyun couldn't help but be filled with delight. Yang Hao was finally making a move. Zhang Long couldn't deal with Ling Han, but would Yang Hao have any trouble dealing with Ling Han? If Ling Han could genuinely stand up against Yang Hao, she would never, ever offend or provoke him again. Instead, she would take a wide berth every time she came across him. Ling Han didn't back down. He stood up and said, "I'm Han Lin. Is anything the matter?" Yang Hao glanced at him before saying, "I'll give you two options. 1. Kowtow to me and apologize. Since you've killed one of my followers, you'll become my new follower from now on. 2. I'll belt you every time I see you. I'll do so until you leave the sect, at which time I'll personally kill you." Gasp! Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. They had initially thought that a bright, unlimited future lay ahead of Ling Han, and there was even a chance for him to become the strongest disciple of the majestic Heaven sect. However, everything had changed in the blink of an eye. He had offended Yang Hao. Just listen to Yang Hao's words. Either submit to him and become his dog, or suffer humiliation for years and be killed upon leaving the sect. Although Yang Hao had put it in a less severe manner, saying that he would kill Ling Han once he quit the sect, such a threat was not against sect rules. Everyone knew that he would act once Ling Han set foot outside sect grounds. Did Ling Han still have a future? Which do you choose? Yang Hao asked calmly. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, but I like neither of the two options. Whether you like them or not isn't important. What's important is that I've given you two options, of which you must select one." Yang Hao said in a domineering manner. He did indeed have the right to speak in such a haughty manner. "Heh, I'll pick the third option. I'll ignore you." Ling Han smiled and said, "When I advance to the Sun-Moon tier and reach a similar cultivation level to you, it'll be your turn to make this choice." The others almost spat blood. Offending Yang Hao is already bad enough, yet Han Lin was actually audacious enough to provoke him even further. Meanwhile, Ling Han thought nothing of it. What else could he do? Act obsequiously and pray that Yang Hao would let him off? Impossible. Yang Hao was an opinionated person who believed that everyone in the world should submit to him. How could he take his words back so easily? That being the case, why did Ling Han have to show him any respect? Yang Hao chuckled coldly and said, "You're quite the stubborn person. However, I wouldn't have it any other way." He extended a hand toward Ling Han. Wang. Divine patterns gathered, and heaven and earth instantly lost their luster. It was as if the sky were about to collapse. Powerful. Incredibly powerful. Before his overwhelming might, the so-called 6 king tiers seemed like nothing but a joke. He was the true king, a peerless king. Ling Han's expression became stern, and he said, "You're a Sun-Moon tier elite, yet you're going to attack me inside the sect? So what?" Yang Hao paid no heed to Ling Han's words as he swatted his palm toward him. Boom! He made a pressing motion, and a gigantic origin power hand materialized in the air and pressed down on Ling Han. There was nothing fancy about this strike, nor did he use any secret techniques. He had merely made a simple pressing motion with his hand. However, the might of this strike was harrowing, and even He Tao's expression became apprehensive. He was certain that he wouldn't be able to block such a strike. There was an insurmountable gulf between the Mountain River tier and the Sun-Moon tier unless one reached a power of 10 stars. Even so, they would only be able to challenge the weakest of Sun-Moon tier elites. However, who was Yang Hao? So what if he had only just advanced to the Sun-Moon tier? He was a super genius to begin with, so how could someone one major tier below him dream of challenging him? Ling Han would be no match for him, regardless of how freakish he was. However, Yang Hao wanted to humiliate him. No way. Ling Han retrieved his lion seal. Shui Yinyu had naturally returned the lion seal and Vajra seal to him already. Wang. Ling Han's power instantly soared to the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. However, a divine seal was only a divine seal, after all. Thus, this peak stage was only the peak stage of the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier, not the pinnacle level. Pong! Ling Han made a punching motion, and a massive flame fist soared into the sky and slammed into the gigantic origin power hand. Boom! The gigantic hand was shattered, and the flame fist continued to soar toward the sky, exuding a petrifying aura as it did so. Oh! Yang Hao was slightly surprised, and he said, "Who would have thought? You actually have a divine seal on you. However, this can only raise your power to the consummate level of the Sun-Moon tier. Heh, you want to challenge me with such measly power?" He stepped forward, and a devastating power instantly seeped from his body, transforming into intertwining patches of divine patterns that were as dazzling as could be. "I reached the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier 12 years ago," he announced proudly. The others almost fainted upon hearing this. What kind of cultivation speed was this? Was he trying to scare them to death? He was the #1 prodigy? He was definitely the #1 prodigy in the entire history of the Majestic Heaven sect. He had cultivated for no more than 1,000 years, yet he had already soared from the Shattering Void tier to the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. Not only that, but he had even cultivated each tier to a genuine state of perfection. Even the word prodigy wasn't enough to describe his absurd talent. A slight sense of apprehension gripped Ling Han's heart. Although his power had risen to the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier, this also meant that he no longer possessed the ability to challenge those at a higher cultivation level. Meanwhile, what about Yang Hao? He was certainly a 10-star genius, so adding a power of 10 stars to his cultivation level that was currently at the high extreme of the Sun-Moon tier, even if he were only at the early stage of the high extreme, his power could still surpass 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. This was a power that overwhelmed Ling Han's power. A power 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level? I should be able to remedy this. Die! Yang Hao snapped his fingers, and a streak of light instantly shot toward Ling Han. Ling Han replied with a punch. Pong! The streak of light was obliterated into nothingness. Huh, this power doesn't seem like it's 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. Ling Han was puzzled. The power of Yang Hao's strike was evenly matched with his power. It definitely wasn't 3 stars beyond the pinnacle level. Perhaps he didn't reach the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier? How is that possible? Yang Hao is honored as the #1 prodigy of the Majestic Heaven sect, so how could he not have reached the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier? Relatively speaking, this was the easiest pinnacle level to reach. Ling Han roared and took initiative to attack. He and Yang Hao quickly became locked in an intense battle. Yang Hao humphed softly, yet he didn't dare underestimate his opponent. After several exchanges, Ling Han became certain that his power was no weaker than that of Yang Hao. More precisely, their power was basically on the same level. He became even more puzzled, and he couldn't help but use his mind to communicate with the Black Tower and ask for answers from Notionless Saint. What a stupid brat! The Notionless Saint roared with laughter and said, "Even if you attain a power of 10 stars at the Mountain River tier, do you think you can still maintain a battle prowess of 10 stars after advancing to the lower levels of the Sun-Moon tier? According to your line of thought, wouldn't it be possible to reach a power that surpasses 11, 12, or even more stars?" Yeah, that's right. Ling Han kind of understood, and he said, "So you're saying that the number of stars one can surpass will drop after they advance to the Sun-Moon tier?" "It doesn't drop per se," the Notionless Saint explained. "The power of the Sun-Moon tier is far above that of the Mountain River tier, so a power of 10 stars at the Mountain River tier can only compare to power at the early stage of the low extreme of the Sun-Moon tier. After advancing to the first stage of the Sun-Moon tier, a power that surpasses 10 stars will become a power that can surpass 6 stars. This is similar to how you reached a power of 20 stars at the Shattering Void tier. Were you able to keep these 20 stars after advancing to the Mountain River tier?" Ling Han finally understood. The main reason for this was because of the gulf in power that existed between each major tier of the immortal levels. This would lead to a drop in the number of stars one's power could surpass after they advanced to the next major tier. 10 stars would drop to 6 stars, so 6 stars would drop to 3 or perhaps even 2 stars. No wonder even 5-star geniuses are rare. This all makes sense now. Chapter 1160, Counterattack from the Weak. Chapter 1160, Counterattack from the weak. Yang Hao was brimming with confidence, and he said, "Although your power is on par with mine, you have to realize that power is only one part of battle prowess." His words couldn't be truer. The lion seal could raise Ling Han's power, yet it couldn't raise his speed or defenses. Moreover, his grasp of the regulations of heaven and earth also remained at the mountain river tier. Thus, there was still a huge gulf between him and Yang Hao. Yang Hao's strike just then had only been a casual one. Although he had used power at the Sun-Moon tier, he hadn't channeled the corresponding regulations. However, he didn't hold back anymore, and he unleashed a boundless might that fluctuated throughout the surroundings. It was as if a great emperor had descended onto this mountain peak. Suppress him. Yang Hao threw a punch, and the brilliant divine patterns that burst from his hand made it seem as if heaven and earth were colorless. Ling Han fell into a frantic retreat. He merely possessed enough power to defend against Yang Hao's attacks. However, his grasp of regulations was far inferior to his opponent's. He drew his divine demon sword, a cold expression on his face. He had to make the most of his strengths. If he simply battled against Yang Hao head-on, his only fate would be to suffer defeat. "You still won't yield to me?" Yang Hao raised a hand, and the gigantic origin power hand reappeared in the air. It grabbed at Ling Han, and this time, the hand was engraved with a multitude of divine patterns. This was certainly not a hand that could be shattered with a single strike. Ling Han unleashed his lightning sword technique. Xiao. His speed was incredible, and with the support of more power, he could destroy regulations to a greater extent. However, his physique still lagged behind. Pa, pa, pa. Following his lightning-quick dash, at least a dozen of his bones snapped, while his skin and flesh cracked open. Blood sprayed through the air. A magnificent strike slashed over. Yang Hao was slightly astonished. He raised his hand to his face, only to see a streak of blood appear on his hand. Ling Han's strike had actually wounded him. It had left a tiny scratch on his face. This was merely an insignificant wound, yet Yang Hao couldn't stand to accept this. He was genuinely an invincible king tier, and his cultivation level was far above that of Ling Han. Yet, he had actually been cut by his opponent. This was utter humiliation. Although Ling Han had cut Yang Hao with his sword, his situation was far direr than Yang Hao's. His body was soaked in blood, and it was as if he had been trampled hundreds of times. However, Yang Hao knew that he hadn't hurt Ling Han at all. Rather, Ling Han's wounds were caused by him not being able to withstand the overwhelming power of his own strike. In other words, he had lost this exchange. I severely underestimated him, Yang Hao thought to himself. He stood serious and unmoving, yet streaks of crimson light burst from his body. The might of the crimson light was so profound that everyone present was unable to breathe. It was as if a formidable ancient beast were about to appear from his body. He lashed out again, this time striking with his palm. Ling Han wanted to unleash his fast technique, yet he was shocked to find that his movements had been sealed. Is this Yang Hao's secret technique? Boom! Yang Hao's palm struck over, and a giant crater was smashed into the mountain peak. Meanwhile, Ling Han vomited several mouthfuls of blood as he was sent flying by the strike. He had already activated the Vajra seal upon realizing the dire nature of his situation. If he hadn't done so, vomiting blood would have been the least of his worries, because there wouldn't have been a single piece of unbroken bone in his body. Huh? It looks like you own quite a lot of valuable items. Yang Hao exclaimed in surprise. A mere mountain river tier cultivator was actually able to struggle on and withstand his strikes with the help of 2 divine seals. This was truly astounding. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll and rapidly healed the broken bones in his body. He didn't bother to heal his flesh wounds. When his broken bones were close to being fully healed, he laughed loudly and said, "What does that have to do with you? Yang Hao, eat my sword." He unleashed his lightning sword technique again. There was a cold glint, and his strike was like an immortal swooping down from beyond the sky. Yang Hao was prepared this time, and he crossed his arms before his body. At the same time, Strands of regulations formed divine chains that crisscrossed before his body and acted as a shield. Ling Han let out a loud roar. He had already activated the Vajraseal, so his defenses had also reached the peak stage of the Sun-Moon tier. As such, he could destroy regulations without inflicting wounds upon his own body. There was a flash, and his sword slashed through the crisscross of divine chains. Specks of blood flew through the air. A dark expression fell across Yang Hao's face. He had been wounded again. The wound was only on his hand, and like before, it wasn't very deep. However, he had been wounded twice by the same person. In his eyes, this was utterly unacceptable. If Ling Han were at the heavenly body tier, he would have nothing to say. However, the key was that he wasn't. A mere mountain river tier cultivator had wounded him twice in quick succession. This was absolutely absurd. Yang Hao was seething with rage, and his boundless anger transformed into a sea of flames. He lashed out again, making a pressing motion with his hand. A dark cloud instantly gathered above Ling Han's head. Crackle. Flashes of lightning arced across the sky. Yang Hao had actually summoned the power of lightning. Everyone was stunned upon seeing this. Yang Hao was far too terrifying. He could actually summon the power of lightning. Boom! Like a dance of silver snakes, countless arcs of lightning struck at Ling Han. Although Ling Han was still standing when the dark clouds dissipated, his clothes were already ripped and tattered. Large swathes of his skin were also charred, and it was almost as if he had become a big lump of coal. If it weren't for the Vajraseal, it was very likely that he would have been killed by this strike. Ling Han used his divine sense to communicate with the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping, warning them not to come over to try and help him in battle. Their strength was far inferior to Yang Hao's, so it would be foolish for them to step out in a spur-of-the-moment act. Anyhow, he was quite puzzled at this moment. The sect clearly had a rule against disciples at a higher cultivation level attacking those at a lower cultivation level. However, their intense battle had already gone on for quite some time. He refused to believe that no higher-ups of the sect had noticed them. However, they didn't step forward to put a stop to the battle even though they were aware of it. What was the meaning of this? Ling Han's body swayed. Then, he couldn't help but spit out another mouthful of blood. He wasn't a genuine Sun-Moon tier cultivator, after all, so he was naturally at a massive disadvantage when battling against a prodigy such as Yang Hao. However, no one looked down on him because of this. Quite the contrary. In fact, they all felt a deep sense of admiration for him. He was an absolute freak. He was able to exchange blows with Yang Hao, and he had even managed to wound him twice. If their cultivation levels were the same, Ling Han would genuinely possess the ability to obliterate Yang Hao's legend of invincibility. Can you still continue? Yang Hao asked with a cold chuckle. He didn't feel any shame for picking on the weak. In his eyes, he was merely trampling an ant to death. As such, was there any need for him to take this to heart? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Why not?" His fighting spirit raged, and it reverberated loudly in his heart. Yang Hao humphed in displeasure. In reality, he dearly hoped that Ling Han would submit to him. Even though Ling Han was weaker than him, admitting defeat would still leave mental trauma in his mind. If their cultivation levels became the same in the future, Ling Han's trauma would give Yang Hao a mental edge should they ever face off again. However, Ling Han was far more resilient than he had expected, and this caused him to feel some heat. He enjoyed a great deal of special treatment in the sect, yet this still didn't give him the freedom to kill people as he wished. The main reason he was able to target Ling Han was because there was a reason for him to do so. His follower had been killed by Ling Han. After all, the higher-ups of the sect would allow him to let off some steam, but they definitely wouldn't allow him to kill other disciples. There were some bottom lines that couldn't be traversed. Anyhow, Ling Han was also a supreme prodigy, so the sect definitely held high hopes for him. Another reason they let Yang Hao off the hook was because they wanted to take the edge off Ling Han's spirit. They didn't want him to become too arrogant. Fine, I'll utterly defeat this youth and give him an unforgettable lesson. I'll crush him so thoroughly that he'll feel afraid every time he sees me in the future. Yang Hao moved his arms, and divine chains danced through the air. Chapter 1161. Empress protecting her husband. Chapter 1161. Empress protecting her husband. Yang Hao suppressed Ling Han in all aspects. Even with the protection of the Vajra seal, Ling Han was still riddled with an increasing number of wounds. If it weren't for the indestructible Heaven Scroll, there was no way that he would still be standing at this moment. The onlookers couldn't help but sigh in admiration of his tenacity. Not only were his defenses and recovery ability astonishing, his willpower was even more terrifying. It wouldn't be surprising or humiliating even if someone at the same cultivation level as Yang Hao were to lose to him. Thus, it would be very normal for Ling Han to lose, seeing as his cultivation level was so much lower than Yang Hao's. So, why was he persisting? Anyhow, Ling Han wasn't merely acting as a sandbag. He had also managed to cut Yang Hao, though they were only two very small nicks. However, a cut was a cut, and being able to wound Yang Hao was an astounding feat which other disciples under the heavenly body tier could achieve this. Ling Han would eventually be defeated, but it would be a glorious defeat. That was already enough. Until when can you persist? Yang Hao said with a cold smile. In reality, he could still deal more damage to Ling Han. However, he purposefully held back. This wasn't because he was benevolent, but rather because he wanted to torment Ling Han even longer. His position as a king tier had actually drawn skepticism. This was unforgivable. Ling Han's fighting spirit soared as he wiped the blood from the corners of his mouth. He wasn't simply taking a beating and doing nothing else. Battling against such an opponent allowed him to grasp a deeper understanding and comprehension of his lightning sword technique. He wanted to keep fighting. However, the Lion Seal and Vajra Seal were almost completely exhausted. Both of these divine seals could be used a maximum of 10 times. However, this number wasn't absolute, and a time limit existed for each time the seals were used. Thus, the Lion Seal was almost exhausted even though Ling Han had only used it this one time. This was because he had already battled for too long. The Vajra Seal could still last for a while, though it definitely wouldn't last for too long. What can I do? Do I have to hide in the Black Tower? But that will expose the secret of the Black Tower. That's a spatial god tool. Moreover, it's one that can become invisible. I'm afraid that even the Venerable Trinity will become interested in it. Enough! A cold voice suddenly shouted. Yang Hao turned to look at the source of the sound. It came from a girl, one who looked charming and innocent. However, she was only at the high extreme of the mountain river tier. So what right did she have to command him? He ignored her and threw another palm strike at Ling Han. Pong! There was a flash of light, and the young woman uncannily appeared before Ling Han. Her slender hand was raised, and she easily dealt with his palm strike. Yang Hao was deeply astonished. He had failed to detect how that young woman had arrived before Ling Han. Something's off, he exclaimed in his mind. The young woman's aura was extremely unstable. She was clearly at the mountain river tier, yet the pressure radiating from her body caused apprehension to grip at his heart. In fact, there was even a hint of fear. This was the overwhelming pressure from a higher-tier cultivator. How was this possible? He was at the Sun-Moon tier, so one had to be at the Heavenly Body tier if they wanted to pressure him with their cultivation level. However, was this young woman at the Heavenly Body tier? What a joke. He refused to believe that she was at the Heavenly Body tier. Yang Hao attacked again, this time pushing his palm toward the young woman. I said, enough. Are you seeking death? A frosty look appeared in her eyes, and she also replied with a palm strike. Pa! Yang Hao was instantly sent flying. Clouds of blood exploded from his body, and then he collapsed on the ground, unmoving. He had been beaten unconscious. Everyone on the mountain peak felt their face distort. They could barely believe their eyes. That young woman was a seed who had just entered the sect. However, she didn't appear special, nor did she stand out in any way. Yet, right now, she had just sent Yang Hao flying with a single strike. What kind of formidable strength was this? They had to be seeing things. It had been Ling Han before he had appeared out of nowhere and defeated Wu Jia, one of the 6 kings. Not only that, but he was even able to hold his own against Yang Hao. This was already deeply astounding. Yet, an even more freakish person had appeared at this moment. She had defeated Yang Hao with a single strike. Were the disciples of this new cohort trying to defy the heavens? Who is she? Isn't she a bit too powerful? She's called Hu Feiyun, and she's from the Chaotic Star's majestic empire of the Joint Peace Planet. That's right. She's the 9th king of the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. Gasp! Isn't she at the Mountain River tier? How can someone at the Mountain River tier be so freakishly powerful? Han Lin is also at the Mountain River tier. Isn't he also unimaginably freakish? That's different. Everyone was overwhelmed with shock. They could still accept Ling Han's freakish power as they had all seen him using the divine seals. Even so, his strength was still inferior to Yang Hao's. However, what about Hu Feiyun? Her power hadn't merely been at the Sun-Moon tier. Rather, it had been at the Heavenly Body tier. They couldn't accept this fact. Mountain River tier cultivators couldn't become that powerful even if they swallowed divine pills. Only Ling Han knew that it wasn't Hu Feiyun who had interfered. Rather, her body had been taken over and controlled by Empress Luan Xing's soul. Sure enough, this Empress had him in her mind. Upon seeing him being beaten, she had resolutely come to protect her husband. TSK, she speaks tough, but her heart is soft. I like ye. Yang Hao regained consciousness, and he stared at Hu Feiyun in disbelief. She had only thrown a casual strike, yet he had been utterly defeated. In fact, he didn't even have time to react. How large was the gulf between their power? He should have been invincible against those at the same cultivation level. Yet, right now, a Mountain River tier cultivator had managed to hold his ground against him, albeit with a lot of difficulty. The next person was even more freakish, defeating him with a single strike. He felt as if his outlook on life had been distorted. How could such things occur? Did you enjoy your battle? Hu Feiyun asked coldly. It was the domineering Empress Luan Xing who was in control of this body right now, and she made a striking motion at Yang Hao as she spoke. Pong! Yang Hao was thrown into the air, and clouds of blood once again exploded from his body. In fact, a large amount of his life essence also drained away. He was severely wounded, so much so that the foundation of his cultivation was endangered. A middle-aged man appeared and said, "Heh, don't overdo it." There were 2 great stars hovering behind him, both of which were protecting Yang Hao. Although Yang Hao had faced some challenges before, he could have still ground the edge off Ling Han's spirit. However, Yang Hao had been beaten to the point where even his life essence was starting to drain away. Things had been taken too far, especially since the sect held relatively high hopes for Yang Hao. You dare to stop me? Empress Luan Xing said coldly. A boundless might exuded from her body. The middle-aged man smiled and said, "You're Empress Luan Xing, aren't you? You left a spiritual mark on this person's body, and thus you're able to project a portion of your power into her body. However, it's only a spiritual mark, after all. I don't want to erase it from her body, so why don't we call it a day?" Who could guess that Empress Luan Xing was a member of the 9-snake tribe? Who could guess that she had the ability to separate out 9 souls and form 9 clones? This wasn't as simple as leaving a spiritual mark. Not only could Empress Luan Xing's 9 clones mature like normal cultivators, but they could even host her awareness and become infinitely more powerful. A baleful smile tugged at Empress Luan Xing's lips, and she said, "You can try." How domineering was a ruler. She didn't give him the time to refute her, and she immediately lashed out with her slender hand. Power at the heavenly body tier burst into the surroundings, and it was as if heaven were about to collapse and stars were about to fall. It seemed as if an apocalypse were about to befall them. The middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. How is she so powerful? He had no time to think, and he frantically moved to block her attack. Pong! He was sent flying by Empress Luan Xing's strike. Everyone was stunned. What the absolute fuck? She's so powerful that she probably has no friends. Chapter 1162. Don't let this dog go crazy again. Chapter 1162. Don't let this dog go crazy again. This middle-aged man was called Wei Zicheng, and he was at the medium extreme of the heavenly body tier. He was extremely renowned in the Majestic Heaven sect. Even at the Majestic Heaven sect, there were only 24 heavenly body tier elites. However, an elite like him had actually been sent flying by a single strike. Who could believe this? Not only that, but the person who had achieved this feat was actually a mere mountain river tier disciple. This was far too astonishing. As powerful and as prodigious as Yang Hao was, he could only battle against those at the Sun Moon tier. Could he challenge heavenly body tier elites? No way. The onlookers had felt their heads go numb with shock when they witnessed Yang Hao being defeated by a single strike. Yet, right now, even Wei Zicheng was defeated by a single strike. The onlookers were transfixed with shock, and they were so stunned that even their souls almost left their bodies. Wei Zicheng grimaced as he crawled up from the ground, a look of pure shock on his face. He had thought that Hu Feiyun only possessed a spiritual mark of Empress Luanxing. As such, her power would at most be a fraction of that of the heavenly body tier. However, by the looks of it right now, her power was far above just a fraction of the heavenly body tier. If a fraction of the Empress power was already this strong, then this Empress had definitely reached the pinnacle level of the heavenly body tier. Wei Zicheng suppressed his anger and said, "I have to admit that your strength is astonishing. However, this is the Majestic Heaven sect." Empress Luanxing took no heed of his words. She clasped her hands behind her back and said, "Don't let your dog run loose. If he goes crazy and attacks people again, I'll make sure to knock all of his teeth out." Yang Hao felt utterly humiliated. He had been compared to a dog. However, did he dare to jump out and speak now? That was Empress Luanxing. Which ruler wasn't bold and wise? Which ruler wasn't supremely talented and at the peak stage of the heavenly body tier? Yang Hao was indeed an outstanding prodigy. However, if he wanted to surpass Empress Luanxing, that would take him at least tens of thousands of years. In fact, it might even be impossible to surpass her. After all, how many eternal river tier elites did this galaxy have? 1. Yang Hao could only swallow this humiliation. There was a look of deep hatred in his eyes as he glowered at Ling Han. It was because of this person that he had been humiliated before everyone. Although losing to a heavenly body tier elite wouldn't smear his reputation much, it was still extremely embarrassing to have so many others witness his pathetic defeat. Ling Han cracked a smile at him. This was his wife, so it was only natural that she stepped out to help her husband. "Who told you to pick on me first? If our cultivation levels were the same, who would be afraid of whom?" A look of fury flashed across Wei Zicheng's face. However, his might was significantly weakened due to Empress Luanxing's domineering aura, and the threats that were at the tip of his tongue wouldn't come out no matter what. This was the difference between elites and king tiers. "Remember my words." Empress Luanxing swept her gaze over Yang Hao before shutting her eyes. When she reopened them, her formidable aura receded like a falling tide. Her domineering aura was gone, and it was replaced by one of innocence and ditziness. She had naturally reverted back to being Hu Feiyun. "Huh? Why is everyone staring at me?" the ditzy woman said. There was a puzzled look on her pretty face. The others couldn't help but grimace. Who would have thought that this unremarkable woman actually had such a terrifying background? This unremarkable wasn't referring to Hu Feiyun's looks, but rather her performance after she entered the sect. She hadn't done anything astonishing or worthy of notice. Thus, she was naturally unremarkable when compared to the other similarly talented seed-level prodigies. However, there was actually the spiritual mark of a supreme elite imprinted into this unremarkable woman's body. This almost frightened them to death. Thankfully, they hadn't picked on her before. Otherwise, they would die without even knowing how they were killed. Although Empress Luanxing had left, Wei Zicheng still didn't dare to touch Hu Feiyun. He glanced at her one last time before grabbing Yang Hao and striding down the mountain peak. Although Yang Hao hadn't been killed by Empress Luanxing's attacks, he had still suffered extremely grave wounds. In fact, his wounds were definitely a dozen, or even 24 times more severe than Ling Han's. This revealed the Empress' attitude: "If you beat my people, I'd return the favor 10 times over." How domineering! Ling Han murmured to himself. No wonder she wants me to reach the Genesis tier before allowing me to marry her. Otherwise, based on her strong temperament, she'll definitely be the one riding on top of me. Say, it's not like I can't accept that position. After this incident, none of the seeds felt like continuing their discussions anymore. Thus, everyone started to take their leave. Anyhow, they all had wild ambitions to reach the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier after witnessing the battles of the King tier prodigies. Otherwise, what would it matter even if they advanced to the Sun Moon tier? They would most definitely lose if they were to battle against King tiers at the same cultivation level. They were all prodigies among prodigies, and thus it was only natural that their aim was to become an invincible King tier. Brother Han, I'll contact you in a few days, He Tao said with a smile. He then waved and bade farewell. Ling Han nodded and said, Sure, let's talk later. Senior Brother Han, do you know of someone called Ling Han? Xiao Sisi and the others all walked over and stared at Ling Han. Like Ling Han, this man also possessed a terrifying physique. However, they refused to believe that there existed two such freaks in the world. Moreover, this person was called Han Lin, and wasn't the reverse of this Ling Han? Ling Han knew that they were already suspicious of his identity. Thus, he didn't plan to hide it from them any longer. Anyhow, he trusted that they weren't big mouths who would go around telling everyone. He smiled and said, Guys, it's been 2 years. You all look quite well, huh? Xiao Sisi and the others were all moved. Fuck, it really is him. I was thinking it was you. However, I wasn't really sure, as you were only at the high extreme 2 years ago. Su Jing sighed with emotion and continued. It's only been 2 years, yet your cultivation level has already surpassed ours. That's unbelievable. I was just lucky, Ling Han said. Fuck, you're showing off. I can't get used to this. Drag him along for a drink. We have to get him drunk. Agreed. We definitely have to get him drunk. They dragged Ling Han to go drinking, and the Rain Emperor and Ding Ping naturally tagged along. To Ling Han's surprise, Xiaowuk also went along with them. He couldn't help but sigh with emotion. They had once been enemies, yet Xiaowuk's attitude toward him had seen a massive change. There was a small town under the majestic Heaven sect, and it had restaurants, bars, and all the other necessary services. They paid for a private room, then started to drink to their heart's content. Ling Han mentioned the mystery realm that He Tao had invited him to enter together, and to his surprise, a lot of them already knew about this. You're probably referring to the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Xiao Sisi nodded and continued. That's an ancient mystery realm, and it's one where Venerable Trinity personally broke open the outer layer of restrictive formations. If he hadn't done so, no one would be able to enter. However, Venerable Trinity himself isn't able to enter this mystery realm. According to rumors, doing so will either result in his death or result in the destruction of the entire mystery realm. There are numerous ancient treasures inside, and there are also some high-grade godly medicines. It's extremely attractive to cultivators. However, only those at the Mountain River tier can enter. So many people purposefully suppress their cultivation in order to stay at this tier. Their aim is simply to enter this mystery realm a few more times. They wish to accumulate enough resources and comprehension for their future cultivation. Su Jing and the others all chimed in to explain the situation. They all had powerful backgrounds, and thus they were naturally more informed than Ling Han when it came to such secrets. However, I've heard that some powerful clans go even further. They specifically have some Sun Moon tier elites sever their cultivation level and act as guards for their juniors. I've also heard about such practices, Xiaowuk said. Moreover, even though they've severed their cultivation level, they can still raise their power by ingesting some forbidden alchemical pills. Coupled with their comprehension that's already at the Sun Moon tier, an increase in power naturally means that they're also able to wield higher tier regulations. Which means they may as well still be at the Sun Moon tier. Chapter 1163, Gao Faction. Chapter 1163, Gao Faction. Ling Han was slightly astonished. People actually went to such great lengths for a mystery realm? This proved just how extraordinary that place was. Otherwise, why would those powerful forces make so many preparations? By the looks of it, I'll have to tag along with you guys when the mystery realm opens, he said with a smile. These prodigies were all successors of super powerful forces. As such, they were extremely well informed regarding the situation inside the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Ling Han refused to believe that the forces behind them would remain inactive faced with the temptation of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Perhaps those kinds of mountain river tier cultivators would also follow them into the Mystery Realm. Hee hee. Xiao Sisi and the others all chuckled in reply. There was no need to lie to someone who already knew their secret. It was because they also engaged in such practices that they knew of these secrets. Brother Ling, you can ask for whatever you want if you're willing to join my 1,000-frost majestic empire, Xiao Sisi said. There was a glimmer in her bright eyes. An air of charm exuded from her body. Her promise, coupled with her gaze, was almost as if she were saying, I'll even consider marrying you. Hee hee, Brother Ling, I have a little sister, and she's a stunning beauty who's worth sacrificing nations and cities for. Duan said hurriedly. You together with her are a match made in heaven. I guarantee that I can earn a position of a duke for Brother Ling. Join the domineering summer majestic empire, and we'll be blood brothers, Xiao Wuk said. Ling Han had already proved his talent. He was worth this price. Although Ling Han had offended Yang Hao was only at the Sun Moon tier. Moreover, his background wasn't any stronger than theirs. It could be said that as long as Yang Hao didn't reach the Eternal River tier, they needed not be afraid of him. Anyhow, even if he could reach the Eternal River tier, how many years later would that be? Yang Hao had only taken less than 1,000 years to reach the high extreme of the Sun Moon tier. However, it was a huge and difficult leap to advance from the Sun Moon tier to the Heavenly Body tier, to say nothing of the Eternal River tier. There was only a single Eternal River tier elite in the galaxy, and this proved just how extraordinarily difficult it was to reach this tier. Thus, his several hundred years lead over Ling Han would disappear in no time. In the future, advancing just a single tier would take him tens of thousands of years. A period of several centuries was nothing compared to this. Meanwhile, Ling Han skirted around their questions and avoided giving any answer. He already had his own force, so how could he join someone else's empire? In any case, even if we're to join one, it would be the Chaotic Star's majestic empire. After all, even the Empress was his. Of course, he only dared to say this in his mind. Otherwise, the Eternity Sky Emperor, J-Drop Emperor, and even a few members of the Seven Generals might charge over to the majestic Heaven sect to kill him. When the gathering concluded, Ling Han met up with the Rain Emperor, Feng Piyun, Murong Qing, and Helian Tianyun and started to drink again. Now that Ling Han had arrived, they could naturally cultivate under the reincarnation tree again. Meanwhile, Ling Han snuck out for a break and took Shui Yinyu to a field of flowers far away from the reincarnation tree. Wife, our son is so fortunate, Ling Han said in admiration as he cupped his hands over her voluptuous breasts. Helian Xian Shui's breasts were pitifully small in comparison. It was with great fortune that her flat chest hadn't starved their son to death. Although they had already become one, Shui Yinyu was still easily embarrassed. Her face flushed red, and she turned around to bite his wrist, chiding, "Damn pervert." Her sparkling eyes were filled with affection. Ling Han's heart shuddered in excitement, and he said, "Thankfully I was shameless enough. Otherwise, how could such a beautiful teacher have become the mother of my child?" Shui Yinyu struggled weakly and scolded, "If you weren't pervertedly groping me while saying this, perhaps I might have been moved. Now, however, I only want to bite this damn pervert to death." "Is your Zodiac the dog? You're actually going to bite me?" A playful look flashed across his eyes, and he said, "If you like biting so much, I can teach you a new kind of game. I guarantee you'll be able to bite and nibble to your heart's content." He started to whisper in Shui Yinyu's ears, and her eyes instantly widened in astonishment. She couldn't help but leap up and jump on top of Ling Han's body. "Damn pervert! Stupid pervert! Shameless pervert!" Ling Han laughed heartily and said, "So, wife, it turns out that you like to take the lead. Come, your hubby will let you do as you please today. Shui Yinyu pinched him aggressively. Why did this person always tease her until she became utterly embarrassed? Gasp. Say, wife, where are you pinching? Ling Han purposefully clenched his teeth and sucked in a sharp breath. Shui Yinyu looked down, only to find that she had pinched his erect body. She was so embarrassed that she could barely look Ling Han in the eyes. Hee, wife, I love it when you're like this, Ling Han said with a chuckle. You're clearly a seductive beauty, yet you're so easily embarrassed. Damn, pervert. After battling against Wu Zhe and Yang Hao, Ling Han naturally became renowned throughout the majestic heaven sect. Although Hu Feiyun's performance had been more stunning, everyone knew that her power was derived from the spiritual mark in her body. Her actual power was only SOSO. The next morning, an endless stream of people came to visit Ling Han. They wanted to become friends, or at least become acquainted with him. Ling Han didn't act haughtily. Instead, he talked and joked with them, because in his eyes, these people were walking piggy banks. Those who could enter the majestic heaven sect were generally all successors of powerful forces. The only thing they weren't short on was money. He needed to earn money, so he had naturally placed his focus on alchemy. Once he refined pills, these people would become his customers. Ling Han chuckled gleefully. His attitude was warm and welcoming, and those who came to visit all felt flattered by his hospitality. They hadn't expected for Ling Han to be so modest and kind. Meanwhile, Shui Yinyu shook her head in pity. She knew Ling Han extremely well, so she naturally knew what he was thinking. These people are being treated as pigs for slaughter, yet they're still thanking Ling Han so profusely. Sure enough, they're being sold and still helping the seller count his profits. Then, her mind wandered to herself. Hadn't she also been willingly captured by him? This sweetheart. Her voice was embarrassed yet affectionate. Cough. This is senior brother Han. Am I correct? A man in green walked over, and a look of amazement flashed across his face as his eyes swept over Shui Yinyu. He glanced at her once more before turning his eyes to Ling Han. Ling Han's impression of him was already at rock bottom. That's right, I'm Ling Han, he said indifferently. The man in green smiled haughtily and said, I'm Guy Yongsi, and I've come from the Gao Faction. What Gao Faction? Ling Han hated it when others acted haughtily before him. He felt annoyed just looking at the smug face of the man in green. Guy Yongsi remained unfazed and said, Senior brother Han, you still don't know, do you? Our majestic heaven sect is actually split into several factions. Our founder took 9 disciples in total, and thus the factions led by them are the strongest. The Gao faction is one such faction. Ling Han was slightly astonished. Venerable Trinity didn't wish to dominate the galaxy, yet by the looks of it, his 9 disciples were definitely no peace lovers. Once the Venerable Trinity passed away, this galaxy would definitely descend into chaotic war, one which would require maps to be redrawn. So what? Ling Han said indifferently. A hint of anger crept onto Guy Yongsi's face. Hadn't Ling Han heard him say that he had come from the Gao faction, a faction that was founded by one of Venerable Trinity's disciples? However, he forcefully suppressed his anger upon remembering the objective of his visit. I've come on behalf of the young master to specially invite senior brother Han to join our Gao faction. Chapter 1164, Not Interested. Chapter 1164, Not Interested. I'm not interested, Ling Han answered without a moment of hesitation. Guy Yongsi faltered for a moment before saying, Senior brother Han, don't you want to consider it for a little longer? Is there something wrong with your ears, or is there something wrong with your brain? Ling Han asked. Guy Yongsi was flabbergasted. Had he not explained clearly just then? He had said that he was inviting Ling Han to join the Gao faction on behalf of the young master. Do you know how magnificent the Gao faction is? He felt that he had to explain further, and so he continued, Lord Gao Feng, the faction leader, is the 4th disciple of the Venerable Trinity. Moreover, he's a super elite at the consummate level of the heavenly body tier. In fact, there's a great chance he'll advance to the eternal river tier in the future. Gao Huang, the young master, is also an elite at the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. He'll definitely become a heavenly body tier paragon in the future. Ling Han almost burst into laughter. Equating a heavenly body tier elite to a paragon? Ludicrous. He shook his head and said, "Are you done yet?" Han Lin, don't be an ungrateful wretch, Guy Yongsi said harshly. You have to realize that young master definitely won't take no for an answer. I'm so scared, Ling Han said with a smile. Guy Yongsi was furious. This person actually dared to tease Gao Huang's name one? He humphed and said, if you offend young master, it will be difficult for you to take even a single step in the majestic heaven sect. Young master has only cultivated for 300,000 years, yet he's already reached the consummate level of the sun-moon tier. He can definitely break through to the heavenly body tier within 1 million years. This was indeed astonishing. Although 300,000 years seemed like a long time, those at the consummate level of the mountain river tier already had lifespans of 400,000 years. Meanwhile, the maximum lifespan of sun-moon tier elites could reach 4 million years. Thus, reaching the peak stage of the sun-moon tier in 300,000-odd years was definitely impressive. However, Ling Han didn't think much of it. One could indeed be labeled a prodigy if they reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier within 300,000 years. This was quite an astonishing feat, after all. However, in the majestic heaven sect, achieving such a feat wasn't all that outstanding. Because this place didn't lack prodigies. If Gao Huang's father hadn't been a heavenly body tier elite, he wouldn't necessarily have reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier so quickly. This was similar to Zhao Luan, who was talented, but not the most talented in the world. However, he still managed to reach the sun-moon tier within 1,000 years. Life would be a lot easier if one had a powerful father. However, even though Gao Huang had reached the peak stage of the sun-moon tier already, it would be almost impossible for him to break through to the heavenly body tier. If one wasn't talented enough, it would be impossible for them to reach the heavenly body tier even if they were trained by heavenly body tier elites. However, the majestic heaven sect had only been founded tens of thousands of years ago, and Venerable Trinity had spent all of his time battling on the two-realm battlefield before that. Thus, it was possible that his 9 great disciples had battled alongside him. If that was the case, perhaps Gao Huang had also participated in battle before. As such, it was possible that he was indeed quite talented. Ling Han waved a hand and said, "Okay, you've said everything that you wanted to say, so you can take your leave now. Go on, see yourself out." Guy Yongsi shook in anger. This brat was truly arrogant and supercilious. "Why, you're far too arrogant," he stammered angrily. "You'll definitely regret this. Just wait and see." Ling Han's expression became cold, and he said, "You dare to threaten me?" He turned to Shui Yinyu and asked, "Wife, this dumb C*T came to my house and threatened me, so what do you say I should do?" "Beat him to a pulp, of course." Ling Han answered his own question before Shui Yinyu could even reply. He flashed a wicked smile at Guy Yongsi. Don't act recklessly." Guy Yongsi felt a cold chill run down his spine. No need to be so modest. Ling Han immediately captured Guy Yongsi. Then, loud thumps started to reverberate around his residence as he beat him to his heart's content. Ling Han was genuinely ticked off. This was his residence, yet this person had run over and demanded that he become someone else's underling. After being rejected, he had even dared to threaten him. Wasn't he asking for a beating? Why you? Don't forget that I'm a member of the Gao Faction." Guy Yongsi shrieked through his anguished wails. "I'll beat you into submission." Ling Han laughed loudly as he continued to pummel Guy Yongsi. Lackeys such as Guy Yongsi naturally didn't possess much backbone. He started to beg for mercy after a while, and he wailed that he wouldn't dare threaten Ling Han ever again. Ling Han finally stopped and said, "I'll break your dog legs if you ever dare to set foot inside my residence again. Understood?" Guy Yongsi nodded frantically and said, "Understood, understood." His only wish at this moment was to escape from this demonic lair. "Haha, fuck off then." Ling Han tossed him out of his residence. Guy Yongsi stumbled and rolled as he hurriedly crawled up from the ground. He didn't dare speak another word, and he only turned around after running for a good 100 or so meters. He had initially wanted to throw down a threat, yet a cold chill gripped at his heart when he saw Ling Han's face. He swallowed the words that were already at the tip of his tongue before turning around and fleeing as quickly as he could. How boring, Ling Han said with a shake of his head. Shui Yinyu also shook her head and said, even if you wanted to refuse, couldn't you have done it in a less offensive manner? I couldn't contain myself. Just looking at his smug face made me want to beat him, Ling Han said with a chuckle. Shui Yinyu sighed. She also knew Ling Han's temperament. However, it was because of his confidence and pride that he was able to improve in leaps and bounds. Be careful, she said. Ling Han was already a seed, so the sect definitely had high hopes for him. Thus, they definitely wouldn't allow others to target him too much. It was just that he had to be extremely careful outside the sect. However, Ling Han had the Black Tower, so protecting himself couldn't be any easier. Shui Yinyu felt much more at ease upon thinking of this. Ling Han left his palace and headed to the town that sat at the foot of the mountain. He wanted to see if there were any higher-grade pill recipes. Everything was in place now, and he was only missing high-grade pill recipes that would allow him to refine divine pills and earn boatloads of money. He arrived at the town, and after walking around for a while, he saw the words Emo Clan Establishment. Is it that Emo Clan? He had been ambushed by several elites before and ended up drifting through the galaxy. It was thanks to his encounter with the Emo Clan starship that he had been able to make it to the flying cloud planet. He walked into the store. A store attendant walked over and greeted, Sir, are you looking for anything in particular? Our store has everything, from god tools to divine pills. Or perhaps you're looking for tool refining materials or alchemical materials. As long as you request it, there's nothing that we can't get you. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Are there any pill recipes? Pill recipes? The store attendant's expression revealed that he was somewhat troubled. Due to the special nature of cultivation techniques, pill recipes, and formations, they were rarely ever taken out and sold. Are there none? Ling Han asked with a smile. How is that possible? The store attendant said hurriedly. However, there's only an extremely limited amount, and they're all especially dear. Price isn't an issue, Ling Han said. He had sold many pills before he left, so he was genuinely not short on money right now. However, there were a lot of places where he needed to spend money, had several brothers, disciples, and also a lover. Which of them didn't need cultivation resources? Most importantly, he needed an exorbitant amount of godly metal to raise the level of his divine demon sword. How expensive was godly metal? I can't decide myself. I need to report it to the manager of the store. The store attendant didn't dare to sell the pill recipes himself. No problem, Ling Han said with a nod. It wasn't long before an elder at the consummate level of the mountain river tier walked out. A smile appeared on his face when he saw Ling Han, and he said, Oh, it's young Master Han. Ling Han was slightly puzzled, and he said, You know who I am? Naturally. Young Master Han is a rising star of the majestic heaven sect, the elder complimented. If I'm unaware of such matters, how can I do business? That's right. You wanted to buy pill recipes? Correct, Ling Han said with a nod. There was a glimmer in the elder's eyes, and he said, This might be rude, but may I ask if you're planning to refine pills yourself? Chapter 1165, Good Faith. Chapter 1165, Good Faith. Ling Han hesitated for a moment. However, upon recalling how the Emo clan had helped him, he didn't hide the truth and said, That's right. I'm going to refine pills myself. The elder was astonished, and the smile on his face grew even larger. Young Master Han, this elder wants to do some business with you. That's right. My surname is also Han. What a coincidence. My name in just a single word, what? Oh, so it's Manager Han. Ling Han greeted the elder before saying, What business does Manager Han want to do with me? I can give you a few pill recipes free of charge. However, when you succeed in refining the alchemical pills, I hope that you can sell them through us. Ling Han faltered for a moment before feeling a sense of admiration for Han Huo. As expected of a businessman, It looked like Manager Han was being extremely generous, but this wasn't entirely the case. Pill recipes were indeed a type of resource, though it could be argued that it was a worthless type of resource. After all, it was extremely easy to make copies of pill recipes. Thus, there was actually no loss for the Mo clan establishment in it. Moreover, even if they didn't make a cent off selling Ling Han's pills, they could still bring in a huge customer flow. Pills were essential goods to cultivators. Also, since cultivators came to buy pills, perhaps they would also buy some other items along the way. Even if they bought just one more item, the Mo clan establishment would still have made a profit. In addition, they would become acquainted with Ling Han, a super genius, just for the price of a few pill recipes which they wouldn't lose money off anyway. There was absolutely no loss for the Mo clan establishment. No wonder the Mo clan is able to spread its establishments throughout the galaxy. They're indeed good at seizing opportunities and acting in good faith. However, Han Huo didn't know just how important his sincere offer was, nor did he know just how much help he would bring the establishment. Ling Han was the Alchemy Emperor. Ling Han smiled and said, "No problem. Then I'll thank Manager Han for the pill recipes first." Han Huo was delighted upon hearing Ling Han's reply. In reality, he hadn't given this as much thought as Ling Han had merely wanted to become acquainted and be on good terms with Ling Han. After all, this was a profitable agreement, and they could also acquaint themselves with a young king tier on top of that. As for Ling Han saying that he could refine pills, Manager Han didn't actually take this to heart. After all, how could someone be so prodigious? If one had such terrifying cultivation ability, they wouldn't also be a genius in alchemy, right? Thus, saying that he would sell pills for Ling Han was naturally just a polite way of flattering him. "What level pill recipe does young Master Han want?" Han Huo asked. "Level 5, Ling Han replied. He could already refine level 4 divine pills, and thus his next target was obviously refining level 5 divine pills. Han Huo was taken aback with surprise. Level 5? If you want to muck around, level 1 divine pills are already more than enough. What's the point of playing with level 5 divine pills? Even if you're a seed of the Majestic Heaven sect, and even if you receive a lot of resources, alchemy will suck your resources dry in no time at all. This is especially the case with high-grade alchemical pills." Ling Han smiled widely as he retrieved a pill vial and handed it to Manager Han. "These are mysterious azure pills and jade heaven pills that I've refined. If you could please sell them for me, Manager Han." Han Huo was a little baffled as he accepted the pill vial. Only after staring at them for a while did he realize that Ling Han wasn't kidding around. Mysterious azure pill. This was a level 4 divine pill. Gasp! Could it be that Han Lin is genuinely an alchemist? And a high-ranked one at that? He didn't dare treat this matter lightly, and he hurriedly opened the vials and carefully appraised the pills. The Mo clan establishment sold everything and anything, so Han Huo naturally knew a lot about alchemy. He immediately determined that these pills were exactly what Ling Han had said they were. They were indeed real. Did Han Lin truly refine these? Han Huo chose to believe the affirmative. He was actively trying to acquaint the Mo clan establishment with Ling Han anyway, wasn't he? He nodded and said, "Please wait for a moment, young Master Han. I'll retrieve the pill recipes for you right away. These are fairly valuable pill recipes, so I don't keep them on me lest I accidentally lose them." "No worries. I understand, Manager Han." Han Huo returned after a while, and he handed a small booklet to Ling Han. Ling Han accepted it and glanced at the cover, on which the words 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill were printed. He roughly skimmed over its contents and found that the booklet was all about the materials needed and the refinement process of the 7 Extreme Flying Flame Pill. In fact, the refinement process took up 90% of the booklet. The refinement process of high-grade divine pills was extremely complex. As such, it wasn't abnormal for such pill recipes to take up an entire booklet. The 7 Ultimate Flying Flame Pill can elevate the battle prowess of those who practice fire element cultivation techniques by 2 stars. 2 stars. Ling Han was astonished when he read the introduction of the pill. One had to realize that most cultivators were only run-of-the-mill. One surpassing 1 star was already impossibly difficult, let alone surpassing 2 stars. Although this pill wasn't helpful to his cultivation, he didn't require level 5 divine pills yet anyway. However, if he succeeded in refining this pill, they would definitely be treated as treasures by those who practiced fire element cultivation techniques. Moreover, Sun Moon tier elites definitely weren't short on money. They could afford to buy these pills. Young Master Han, what do you think about this pill recipe? Han Huo asked. It's fine, Ling Han said with a nod. Just a word of warning, young Master Han. This 7 ultimate flying flame pill is extremely difficult to refine. I've heard that even many level 6 alchemists can't refine this pill. So, please don't spend too much time on this pill. After all, young Master Han is a cultivation prodigy. I understand, Ling Han said. Manager Han was telling him that out of goodwill, so he naturally wouldn't become angry. Moreover, his words were indeed true. At the end of the day, cultivation was still the most important. However, little did Han Huo know that Ling Han actually possessed a reincarnation tree. This was a heaven-defying divine tree. They started to discuss the fine details of their collaboration off course. All of this was built on the assumption that Ling Han could successfully refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. Han Huo didn't have much confidence in Ling Han, and thus he offered him a large cut of the profits, 90%, to be exact. He had initially planned to give all of the profits to Ling Han, and it was actually Ling Han who had taken a step back and offered them 10% of the profits. Han Huo genuinely didn't believe that Ling Han could succeed. Thus, he naturally didn't mind giving all of the profits away. It was just thin air, after all. Ling Han needed an exorbitant amount of true origin stones, as he needed to purchase godly metal to raise the level of his divine demon sword. That being the case, he purchased the materials needed for refining the 7 ultimate flying flame pill, and then returned to the majestic heaven sect. He immediately entered the Black Tower to comprehend the pill recipe under the reincarnation tree. The steps to pill refinement were actually very easy to grasp. This simply involved the order of placing ingredients, as well as how to control the flames. Even ordinary people could follow these steps. Even if the steps were more difficult, grasping them was still only a matter of time. However, making the divine patterns of the ingredients intertwine was much more difficult, and was not something that anyone could do. Only those with a powerful divine sense and meticulous control could complete this process. In fact, this process involved millions upon billions of possible variations. As such, ordinary people wouldn't be able to grasp this process even if they spent their entire lives studying it. Even level 5 and level 6 alchemists would need hundreds of years to fully grasp it. Thus, it was only understandable that Han Huo doubted Ling Han's ability to successfully refine this pill in the short term. Meanwhile, Ling Han was brimming with confidence. He had the reincarnation tree. The leaves of the reincarnation tree rustled, and Ling Han entered a state of meditation. He simulated the pill refinement process in his mind again and again, again and again. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Time quietly crept by. Chapter 1166, Stunned Han Huo. Chapter 1166, Stunned Han Huo. 1 day under the reincarnation tree was equivalent to 1 year in the outside world. 7 days passed, and Ling Han made his first attempt to refine the 7 ultimate flying flame pill. He naturally failed. Reality and expectations still differed by quite a bit. Ling Han didn't immediately make a new attempt. Instead, he chose to meditate for 2 days. In other words, he spent 2 years analyzing the reason for his failure. Only after this did he start a new attempt. He failed again. However, Ling Han only spent a few hours analyzing his failure this time. He started his 3rd attempt. Success. However, he only managed to concoct 2 pills. Theoretically speaking, 1 cauldron could yield a maximum of 4 7 ultimate flying flame pills. Ling Han had successfully refined 2, so he was already halfway to success. This was an outstanding result. However, he was extremely dissatisfied when he observed these 2 pills more closely. This was because they were of relatively low quality. In fact, Ling Han felt an urge to throw these 2 pills away. He was the Alchemy Emperor, so what face did he have to give these pills to others? However, he slowly lowered his raised arm. He was too poor. Regardless of their quality, these 2 pills could still be sold for tens of thousands of true origin stones. It would be a pity to throw them away just like this. Sigh, why am I so poor? Ling Han rubbed his chin, and then looked at his divine demon sword. How much money would he need to spend in order to raise the level of his divine demon sword? However, I'll receive a god tool that truly belongs to me. So, it's all worth it in the end. The Black Tower was indeed impressive, yet he could only use it as a spatial god tool. He couldn't unleash its powerful offensive abilities. Thus, it wasn't necessarily better to have a high-level god tool. What was more important was how much of the god tool's power one could unleash. I'll refine more. Ling Han had purchased enough ingredients to refine 5 cauldrons of pills. He had wanted to buy more, but he was strapped for cash, so he could only settle with this amount. His 4th attempt yielded 3 ultimate flying flame pills, and during his 5th attempt, he finally achieved a perfect yield of 4 pills. Although his improvements seemed incredible, he had needed to reflect and analyze under the reincarnation tree after each attempt. It was through this process that he was able to correct his mistakes. Thus, the quality of the pills in the 5th cauldron also saw a marked improvement. In fact, they were bordering on perfection. Ling Han smiled and mused to himself, will Manager Han be stunned when he sees these pills? Only a month had passed, yet he had already refined 9 ultimate flying flame pills. Moreover, 4 of them were of perfect quality. Successfully refining a cauldron of 7 ultimate flying flame pills took 5 days. This refinement time was typical for level 5 divine pills. However, it was rumored that divine pills above level 9 would take at least half a year to refine. A tiny error could destroy months or even years of hard work. My cultivation level hasn't gone up by much, but my divine sense has become far stronger, Ling Han murmured to himself. He had been refining pills for the past few weeks, so he naturally didn't have any time to cultivate. As such, his origin power remained on roughly the same level. However, alchemy was extremely taxing on one's divine sense, and it could be viewed as a kind of tempering. Let me sell these pills first. I need to earn enough money to raise this divine demon sword to level 4. This was Ling Han's short-term goal. Raising the sword to level 5 could be left for the future, for he still hadn't broken through to the Sun-Moon tier yet. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, only to hear Fan Ru say that messengers from the Gao Faction had already visited several times. However, Ling Han had been cultivating in seclusion, so they could only leave in discontentment. It was rumored that Gao Huang had become furious, even releasing a statement saying that Ling Han had to personally beg for an audience with the Gao Faction. The time limit for this? Yesterday was already the last day. Ling Han shook his head and said, "Is he a dumb C***T?" He ignored the matter and left his palace. He arrived at the town at the foot of the mountain and then headed to the Mo clan establishment. Young Master Ling. Han Huo just so happened to be on the ground floor, and he faltered for a moment upon seeing Ling Han. Then, a puzzled expression appeared on his face. Why has this prodigy come again? Has he given up after studying the pill recipe and realizing that he can't possibly refine it? Has he come to exchange the level 5 pill recipe for an easier pill recipe? In his mind, this was reasonable and fair. Ling Han retrieved a vial of pills and said, "Manager Han, could you please sell these pills for me?" Han Huo didn't think much of this. He accepted the vial of pills and asked, "Young Master Han, are these still mysterious azure pill?" "Oh, that's right. The pills that you handed me last time have all sold out already. Moreover, they made quite a big profit." Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "No, these aren't mysterious azure pills. They're 7 ultimate flying flame pills." Pooh! Han Huo instantly spluttered loudly before coughing non-stop. His entire face became red. Is he joking? It's only been a month, yet he's successfully refined the 7 ultimate flying flame pill already? Impossible. Definitely impossible. Although this was a level 5 divine pill, it was extraordinarily difficult to refine. In fact, even level 6 alchemists would avoid refining this pill. However, Ling Han had successfully refined it in just a mere month? Was this some kind of joke? Young Master Han, you're quite the joker, he said with a chuckle. Ling Han also chuckled and said, Indeed, I do enjoy joking around. Han Huo breathed a sigh of relief before curiously asking, Then what pills have you refined this time? He was slightly puzzled. Wasn't Ling Han studying the pill recipe for the 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pill? Why was he suddenly refining some other pill? He opened the vial and poured several crimson-red pills into his hand. To his astonishment, it felt as if these pills were burning. Not only were they radiating heat, but one could also see the flames that were licking over their bodies. If he were an ordinary person, a hole would have been instantly burned into his palm. The temperature of these pills was insanely high. Perhaps even those at the flower blossom tier wouldn't dare to touch these pills. However, Han Huo was at the consummate level of the mountain river tier, so this level of heat was naturally no problem for him. Even so, the astonishment on his face was more pronounced than if his palm were to be burned. How could he not be astonished? These were fucking 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pills. Young Master Han, are you sure you're not joking around with me? Han Huo's face twitched, and it looked as if he were going to faint at any moment. Ling Han laughed loudly as he patted Han Huo's shoulder and said, Manager Han, you need to work on your sense of humor. Although their age differed by tens of thousands of years, Ling Han's cultivation level was above that of Han Huo. Thus, according to the rules of the cultivation world, he was actually Han Huo's senior. As such, it wasn't demeaning for him to pat Han Huo's shoulders. Han Huo examined the pills carefully. He was an expert appraiser, and he immediately determined that the 9 pills were freshly refined. The 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pill had a unique attribute: the fresher it was, the greener the flames on its surface. As it became older, these flames would gradually become blue, then red, and then eventually purple-black. When the pills became purple-black, it signified that they were already too old, with much of their effects having already been lost. In other words, the pills would be as good as useless. Han Huo was almost about to cry. These are genuinely 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pills, and fresh ones at that. Has Ling Han truly succeeded? What kind of freak is he? Young Master Han, did you truly succeed? No, what you're seeing is just an illusion, Ling Han said with a smile. Han Huo finally understood his sense of humor this time. Young Master Han, you almost shocked me to death. It's only been a month, yet you've already refined the 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pill. This is a peerless feat with no precedent. Although he was purposefully flattering Ling Han, his words weren't all that exaggerated. After all, if Ling Han didn't have the reincarnation tree, he would have definitely needed a dozen or so years to fully comprehend the pill recipe. When cultivators reached the immortal level, their lifespan would increase significantly. However, attempting to comprehend secret techniques, formations, pill recipes, and such could easily take them hundreds of years as well. This was especially astonishing. Chapter 1167. Forgotten the warning last time? Chapter 1167. Forgotten the warning last time? Ling Han laughed, and then seriously said, Shopkeeper Han, I need you to do me a favor, and that is to gather as much level 3 godly metal as possible. Use my profits to pay for it. No problem. Han Huo cleverly did not ask why Ling Han was gathering so much godly metal, but rather agreed immediately with confidence. I shall trouble you then, Shopkeeper Han. I am willing to work for you, young Master Han. Ling Han nodded and bought some other materials. He still had to refine the 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pill. That was the source of his income. Han Huo wiped away his sweat as he accompanied Ling Han in his selection of materials. He had not come out of the shocked state he had previously been in. Ling Han smiled and said, Shopkeeper Han, are you regretting our agreement from just now? You take 10% and I take 90%, so you think that it is a great loss? How could that be? Han Huo shook his head hurriedly. Though he felt great heartache, as an outstanding businessman, he knew that Ling Han could have completely not handed the 7 Ultimate Flying Flame pills for them to sell on his behalf. Would they fear that no one would buy such an alchemical pill? Just give a holler, and it was guaranteed that they would be able to sell as many as they had in their stock. Furthermore, Ling Han had been completely capable of taking all the profits at first, yet had still deliberately let the Mo clan business have 10% share. This was a massive favor. Han Huo was naturally clear about that. Could it be that Ling Han did not have a clear understanding of his own alchemy abilities? When he absolutely knew he was able to concoct the 7 ultimate flying flame pills, he still let them have 10% of the profits. How many others could have done this? I am filled with endless gratitude for young Master Han's kindness. He did not understand why Ling Han would look after the Mo clan establishment so much, though. Ling Han nodded and said, "On my way to the majestic heaven sect, someone ambushed me, and I lost my way in the galaxy. Thankfully, I encountered a trade vessel from the Mo clan, and they did not abandon me, but rather gave me a lift." Only now did Han Huo understand. He couldn't help but clasp in hands in respect and said, "Young Master Han is really a man of character." To the Mo clan, this was merely an insignificant act of lending a helping hand, yet they had obtained the friendship of a young king tier in exchange. This transaction was really too profitable. Furthermore, this was also because Ling Han knew to repay their kindness. Otherwise, if he fell out with them and became hostile, what could they do? Ling Han smiled and said, "Shopkeeper Han, please proceed with my request as soon as possible. Don't worry about the type of level 3 godly metal. Even if it is old and worn or impure, it is fine. As long as its quality has reached level 3, it is acceptable." "I will take note. Please come back a month later, young Master Han. I will definitely give you a pleasant surprise, young Master Han," Han Huo said confidently. He decided to report Ling Han's matter to the higher-ups of the Mo clan. In the first place, a young king tier would be worth enticing. What more when it was Ling Han, a man of such character who placed importance on emotion and righteousness? He would report this to the higher-ups of the Mo clan and ask them to endlessly gather godly metal for Ling Han. Mere level 3 godly metal was enough to obtain the friendship of a young king tier. This was really too profitable. Furthermore, Ling Han's achievements in alchemy were really too frightening. He could concoct level 5 divine pills in a mere month, and it wasn't just a single furnace's worth. Hiss, I actually forgot. Young Master Han is still in Mountain River tier, so how could he manage to concoct level 5 divine pills? Is forming the 5th Mountain River equivalent to Sun Moon tier? Cultivating both alchemy and martial arts, and excelling in both. Our Mo clan must definitely not let such a genius slip. Perhaps this young man would be able to rule the whole world. We must spare no expense to be tied to him. Han Huo mumbled. Though his surname was not Mo, he was still a member of the Mo clan because he had married into the Mo clan. His children and grandchildren all had the surname Mo. Ling Han walked casually. Now that there was a reliable source of godly metal, this caused him to be in a very great mood. Next, he should prepare with the matters of the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, and when the journey to this mystery realm ended, he should be about ready to break through to the Sun Moon tier. Once he broke through to the Sun Moon tier, he would set out to find the location of the 5 sects and the Rock Palace. He couldn't drag things on forever. Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, it's been centuries since we've last met. Who knew how she was like now? When she saw him once again, she would definitely be very surprised, wouldn't she? Not only was he a dead man revived, the rate at which he advanced through the cultivation levels was practically unbelievable as well. Merely 1,000 years, and he was already in the Sun Moon tier. This should have surpassed the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden and the Sword Emperor. Having been bullied by this hateful woman for a few decades, it was about time for his turn to counterattack. How could he let her off without thrashing her pert bottom? His son should also be quite grown by now. What about his parents? The little girl, Han Huo, should be more and more womanly, right? What about Helian Sun Shui, Zhu Xian Lu Yutong, and Li Xichan? He sighed. Though not many years had passed in this lifetime, the emotional debts he had incurred had far surpassed those from the 2 centuries he had lived in his previous life. On the way to the majestic heaven sect, Ling Han decided to stuff all his romantic debts back to the bottom of his heart. In comparison, nothing was more important than the longing for power. Only with enough ability would he be able to do what he wanted to do, or it was even merely for him to be capable of breathing a few breaths of air freely. Han Lin! A fierce shout rang out from afar. He looked over and saw that there were 4 people standing at the doorway to his palace. All of them looked angered, and he recognized 2 of them. One was Fu Liangye, whereas the other was Gai Yongsi. Why were they here again? Han Lin, this is your last chance. Young Master Gao has said that if you make your way to Thousand Birds Peak on your knees today, he can forgive your previous disrespect, Gai Yongsi declared arrogantly. Ling Han looked at him strangely and said, Are you a very forgetful person? Are you asking for another beating? Han Lin, a middle-aged man spoke up, his voice deep and low like the boom of thunder. The moment he opened his mouth, a terrifying aura was released. This was not because he was born with a domineering air, but rather because he had used the suppression ability of a superior cultivation level. Sun Moon Tier. No wonder Gai Yongsi was braver today, so it seemed that he had gotten a strong helper. Meanwhile, Fu Liangye smirked coldly. He, too, had joined the Gao Faction, and when he knew that they were going to deal with Ling Han, he immediately took the initiative to ask to come along. That was because he wanted to see how Ling Han was going to yield in the face of superior power. It was all right even if he did not yield, as he would definitely be humiliated then. Indeed, Sun Moon Tier cultivators could not freely make a move on Mountain River Tier cultivators. After all, not everyone's name was Yang Hao. However, if elites of Sun Moon Tier made some moves secretly, suppressing Ling Han's cultivation level, and then let other Mountain River Tier cultivators subdue him, who would be able to say anything? Ling Han walked over, opened the doors, walked in, and then moved to close them. Pooh! Gai Yongsi and the others almost went mad with fury. What did he mean? Could it be that they were empty air to be ignored just like that? Han Lin. Gai Yongsi pressed his hands on the doors, stopping Ling Han from closing the doors. In the Majestic Heaven sect, there was one taboo that could absolutely not be broken. Without obtaining permission, it was forbidden to enter the rooms of another. You could fight at other times, it was all right. After all, cultivators increased their abilities through battle. However, if one's seclusion was disturbed, that could possibly cripple him. This was something that the sect definitely would not allow. Hence, usually, as long as the 2 sides were of equal cultivation levels, they could fight as much as they liked. There was definitely no one who would stop them, but once they returned to their quarters, which was an absolute sanctuary, none would be permitted to do anything. Even Yang Hao would not dare to break this kind of taboo. This was the bottom line. Thus, upon seeing Ling Han walk into his quarters, Gai Yongsi was naturally worried. Ling Han broke into a grin, stretched out a hand to grab him, and Gai Yongsi was swiftly subdued. Apparently, you have forgotten my warning from last time, and have come again. Chapter 1168. The Pitiful Gai Yongsi. Chapter 1168. The Pitiful Gai Yongsi. Gai Yongsi felt terribly aggrieved. Fuck, it wasn't him who had chosen to enter these doors. It was Ling Han who dragged him in, all right? How could he be so unreasonable? Pa! He had barely finished this thought when he was slapped heavily by Ling Han. With such a bad memory, looks like your memory won't improve without another beating. Lord Zhu, save me. Gai Yongsi hurriedly asked for help from that Sun Moon Tier elite. That elite of Sun Moon Tier had the surname of Zhu, with the given name of Tianqiu. Though he was merely in the middle stage of the low extreme, it was sure that even if Ling Han had cultivated the 5th Mountain River Tier to perfection, the former would still be able to suppress him easily. There was a gap of a whole major tier, after all. His nose was almost bent in fury. First, Ling Han closed the doors in their faces, and now, he captured a hostage right under his nose. To what extent was Ling Han looking down on him? Let him go, he commanded darkly. There were multiple streams of frost entwining around his whole body. He was truly in a thunderous rage by now, and could not stop the origin power within his body from gushing out. Ling Han laughed and asked, "And what if I don't? In front of me, you have no right to refuse." Zhu Tianqiu took a step forwards. Boom! The mighty aura of Sun Moon Tear gushed forth like an ocean. Hee, take a look at what's under your feet, Ling Han said, pointing at the doorstep. This is my territory. Without getting my approval, you almost stepped over this doorstep. Do you know what kind of punishment you would have to face? Involuntarily, Zhu Tianqiu's feet paused. This was a taboo that no one in the whole sect could break, not even if it was those few personal disciples of Venerable Trinity. Pa! Ling Han raised his hand, which then fell sharply, giving Gai Yongsi another slap. He had put great force behind this strike, and Gai Yongsi opened his mouth and spat out blood along with a piece of broken tooth. Zhu Tianqiu almost jumped up. Was this brat deliberately provoking him? He had gone too far. As the saying went, hitting the dog depended on the owner one. He was standing right here, just 3 meters away from Ling Han. Yet this guy actually dared to hit his crony. How was that different from actually directly slapping him in the face? Fu Liangye, meanwhile, felt cold creep up in his heart. Could it be that this guy's a maniac? Ling Han had already offended Yang Hao, and had now also completely offended the Gao Faction as well. Was he tired of living? But to become enemies with this kind of maniac, how dangerous was that? He was really afraid by now. Why did he have to be this daring, acting as vanguard? Even if he'd wanted to watch the show, he could have taken out a stool and watched the proceedings from afar. Pa! Ling Han delivered another palm strike, and Gai Yongsi once again spat out a broken tooth. With the force in his hand, he could have easily broken all of Gai Yongsi's teeth with a single palm strike, but he chose to break one with a single strike. Obviously, this was deliberate on his part. Zhu Tianqiu was trembling all over. He sinisterly threatened, "Let go of him, and I will spare you today." Ha ha! Ling Han laughed loudly and pointed at Zhu Tianqiu. People like you all have something wrong inside your brains. It was you people who came to my place to strut around, and you are actually saying that you would spare me? TSK, TSK, TSK. Pa! He slapped Gai Yongsi again. Poor guy. He broke another tooth naturally, which he spat out along with a mouthful of blood. Gai Yongsi felt that he was really too wronged. It was Zhu Tianqiu who was threatening Ling Han, so why was the one being beaten him? But could he talk reason with Ling Han? This guy was obviously a demon king. Han Lin. Zhu Tianqiu felt almost suffocated with his fury. Pointing at Ling Han, he exclaimed, "Do you still want to stay in the sect?" "Sigh, you are threatening me again." Ling Han sighed. Pa! His hand fell again, and Gai Yongsi's fourth tooth was sent flying. "Lord Zhu, please don't say anything else," Gai Yongsi cried. "You guys are arguing, but why is it that I am on the receiving end of punishment?" Zhu Tianqiu humphed. Why did this guy not have even the slightest backbone? True, if this guy had a backbone, how could he have possibly become Gao Huang's henchman? It should be known that among those who could be accepted into the sect was anyone not filled with soaring pride and self-confidence. Even if they were willing to join the Gao Faction, they merely wanted to make use of the resources and network of the Gao Faction to enlarge their own relationship network. Which one of them would be extremely deferential towards Gao Huang? In terms of background, the majority of the people here had heavenly body tier elites supporting them in the background. None of them needed to be afraid of Gao Huang. The only difference was the latter's heavenly body tier backer was inside the sect, and he was also capable of coming into contact with great elites of Eternal River tier. But no matter what, Gai Yongsi was still a lackey of the Gao Faction. His being bullied by an outsider was a humiliation to the whole Gao Faction. Zhu Tianqiu moved, regulations transforming into divine chains that moved to wind around Ling Han. He wanted to capture both Ling Han and Gai Yongsi and drag them both outside. Ling Han snickered and placed Gai Yongsi in front of him as a human shield. Ah! Gai Yongsi yelled in pain. His body had been penetrated by over a dozen divine chains, and one had even stabbed right into his bottom, causing even purple veins to pop on his neck. This was really having a stick up his A****. Come here. Zhu Tianqiu dragged the divine chains back, but Ling Han had hold of Gai Yongsi's arm and would not let go. In terms of power, Ling Han was definitely no match for Sun Moon tier, But the crucial thing here was that Guy Yongsi's physique could not sustain Ling Han's power, either. Being pulled from both sides like this, he instantly released a terrible scream, feeling like he was about to be torn in half by the pure force. Zhu Tianqiu gritted his teeth. In any case, Guy Yongsi was an immortal, so even if his body was torn in two, he would not die. What was important now was to take back the hostage. Otherwise, as long as he was in Ling Han's hands, the Gao faction would continue to have their face slapped. With a ripping sound, blood spurted. Ah! Guy Yongsi released a pitiful scream. His whole person had been torn in half, but the larger half had still been taken back by Zhu Tianqiu. Finally, he had freed himself from Ling Han's control. Yo, sorry about that, Ling Han said, grinning. Sorry, your sister. Do you have the slightest bit of sincerity on your face? If Guy Yongsi had enough power, he'd surely want to strangle Ling Han to death now, but because he did not, he could only swallow his ire, and did not dare to show even the slightest temper. He hurriedly took out an alchemical pill and swallowed it, channeling his origin power to stimulate the medicinal effects. Zhu Tianqiu's eyes were cold and malevolent. He glared at Ling Han, but this was Ling Han's quarters, so he could not move without the slightest scruple. Otherwise, if he even damaged a single tile, he would be in for a great deal of suffering. He took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the flames of rage burning in his heart. He said, Young master told me to pass on a message. If you want to repair the relationship with the Gao faction, then you must bring at least 3 drops of Thousand Source True fluid out after entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm to be presented to young master. After he said thus, he left without even turning back. Fu Liangye and the other person quickly followed on his heels. If they were left behind, then wouldn't they only be violently thrashed by Ling Han? Wait for me. Guy Yongsi could not bother with healing his injuries anymore. He was already so severely injured, and had no further desire to be beaten by Ling Han worse. This Gao Huang wanted to recruit me. Most probably, his initial motive was the Thousand Source True fluid, right? Ling Han mumbled. Something that even the son of a heavenly body tier elite kept in his mind constantly. What kind of treasure would that be? I'll ask someone. He went back into his palace and had Fan Ru guard the doors. No one was allowed to come and disturb him. Then, he entered into the Black Tower and asked Notionless Saint. Chapter 1169, Thousand Source True Fluid. Chapter 1169, Thousand Source True Fluid. Thousand Source True Fluid? Notionless Saint thought for a moment, and then replied, After an immortal of eternal river tier dies, the violence in his blood will be worn away after a very, very long time, and if the essence within has not been completely lost, it could possibly become Thousand Source True Fluid. For immortals below eternal river tier, this is a precious treasure. Every drop of Thousand Source True Fluid would contain the comprehension that the immortal in eternal river tier had about the Tao of heaven and earth, and could aid an immortal in improving his cultivation level, which is pretty good. Realization dawned on Ling Han. No wonder Gao Huang was so anxious about the Thousand Source True Fluid. He had already reached the peak stage of Sun Moon tier, after all. However, how utterly difficult was it to take the one step toward the heavenly body tier? Even his father, who was similarly in the heavenly body tier, had no way to do anything. After Gao Huang consumed these 3 drops of Thousand Source True Fluid, he might even have a chance of breaking through to the heavenly body tier. Though Ling Han had never seen this Gao Huang before, judging by his actions, this man had to be a very greedy character. Furthermore, since it was related to such an important matter like the breakthrough to the heavenly body tier, it was naturally best to have as much Thousand Source True Fluid as possible. And Gao Huang actually said he merely wanted 3 drops. What did that mean? The difficulty level of obtaining the Thousand Source True Fluid had to be incredibly high. Thus, with Gao Huang's greed, he wanted only 3 drops. Sun Moon tier cultivators are not able to enter into the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm. Hence, he sought elites of Mountain River tier everywhere, having others find Thousand Source True Fluid for him. Ling Han shook his head. What an extremely selfish person. What right does he have to ask others to give up treasures that they have obtained with such difficulty? Ling Han could barely bother to get angry, and once again began to concoct alchemical pills. Before entering into the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, he first had to upgrade the Divine Demon Sword up to level 4. This required an extremely large amount of true origin stones. This time, Ling Han did not spend all his time on alchemical concoction. He would take out some time for cultivation to improve his origin power and body art. Only if he himself was strong would he have true power. However, after merely half a month, Ling Han was forced to call a halt to his alchemy. Yuan Chenghe was about to break through. He could not allow Yuan Chenghe to appear for no conceivable reason and endure the heavenly tribulation in the sect. Thus, Ling Han left the sect all by himself, then summoned the cloud-piercing shuttle once more and went to a distant place. He then released Yuan Chenghe so that he could endure the tribulation there. Because his foundations were very solid, added with the fact that Yuan Chenghe's natural talent was very extraordinary, he naturally endured the heavenly tribulation easily, which meant Ling Han had another immortal on his side. He also encountered no problem in enduring the tribulation. However, in the case of Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu, there was a bit of difficulty. It couldn't be helped. In terms of talent, these two were really a bit too ordinary. In a small world, they could still barely be considered geniuses, but ordinarily speaking, they should have been limited to the flower blossom tier. But now, Ling Han had forcibly pushed them up to shattering void tier, and they might even possibly break through to the immortal level. This caused the two of them to feel like their own power was slightly beyond their own control. So, they would probably only be able to reach the mountain river tier. Or so Ling Han thought. Qin Yi and Yuan Chenghe still had space for further improvement, but as for Guang Yuan and Zhu Wujiu, that would be that. He returned to the Majestic Heaven sect and continued to cultivate earnestly in seclusion. When the deadline of 1 month had arrived, he brought the alchemical pills he had concocted to the Mo clan establishment. So much godly metal. Ling Han was surprised. The spatial spirit tool that Han Huo had handed him was filled to the brim with godly metal. Though he knew that alchemical pills were very profitable, could it really be as profitable as this? Ho, I reported young Master Han's matter to the clan, and the clan issued a command to me, which was to do my utmost to complete young Master Han's mission, Han Huo said with a smile. I have spent the whole month gathering godly metal. Besides that, the clan is also mobilizing our members to transport godly metal from other locations. As long as young Master Han does not say it is enough, the supply of godly metal will not stop. Ling Han smiled and said, Aren't you all afraid that I will not be able to concoct enough alchemical pills to repay this debt? Haha, as long as young Master Han is happy, what would merely some godly metal be worth? Han Huo declared proudly. The Mo clan could be considered the largest business establishment in this whole galaxy. Though Han Huo's words were a bit exaggerated, he did indeed have the confidence to say them. Ling Han was surprised. The Mo clan actually had such a high opinion of him, investing so much in him before he had even broken through to the Sun Moon tier. It should be known that the least scarce resource in this world were geniuses, and it was very easy for them to wilt halfway to the peak. It could only be said that Mo clan was really filthy rich, and they were capable of taking the risk of losing the investment. Furthermore, once Ling Han became a great elite of the heavenly body tier in future, the rewards that the Mo clan would reap would be astonishing. If Ling Han could go even further and reach the eternal river tier, the Mo clan was really about to soar. Thank you. Ling Han did not play coy. He was confident that he would be able to reach the heavenly body tier, eternal river tier, or even Genesis tier. The amount that the Mo clan had invested in him today would definitely reap them a very heavy fruit in future. When he returned to the Majestic Heaven sect, Ling Han began to improve the grade of the Divine Demon Sword. Slash, 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 slash. In merely less than half a day, all the godly metal had been turned into scrap metal, and the Divine Demon Sword was still far from reaching level 4. The higher the grade, the more godly metal was needed for it to advance further. Moreover, it was not just a little bit more. Ling Han could only wait longer. Thankfully, there was still more than 3 months' time until the time the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm would open. The Majestic Heaven sect had also begun to distribute the entrance slots for entering into the Mystery Realm. Aside from the disciples at the Mountain River tier in the sect, there was also a portion of entrance slots distributed to those from outside the sect. As for what they would need to give up in exchange, only the person who was responsible for this matter would know. Ling Han could not control these matters, so he merely spent his efforts in cultivation and alchemy. The demonic power source had also been expended more or less. Thankfully, Ling Han was the alchemy emperor on his own merits, and could use alchemy to support his cultivation. Though the effects were not as amazing as using the demonic power source, the advantage was that he could concoct alchemical pills on his own, and there was no limit to their number. Good news came one after another. Along with the endless supply of godly metal the Mo clan establishment delivered to him, his divine demon sword had finally been improved to level 4. Now, he needed level 4 godly metal to be able to continue improving the grade of the divine demon sword. Though the requirement had only been increased by a single grade, the price needed was definitely tenfold and above. Thus, Ling Han felt embarrassed to have the Mo clan establishment continue working for nothing. Instead, he planned to first pay back the debts that he had incurred this time round before he considered the matter of purchasing level 4 godly metal in bulk. He placed the hopes of easy money on this venture into the mystery realm. If he could get a few secret techniques and take them out to be sold off, his profits would definitely be incredible. Besides, he had also reached the middle stage of the pinnacle level, while his power had advanced to 8 stars. This was extremely incredible. Who asked him to have the reincarnation tree, so he had enough time to accumulate comprehension of his cultivation level. The Rain Emperor, Ding Ping, Shui Yinyu, Hu Feiyun, and the others were also obviously improving. The most incredible one was still the Rain Emperor, who had shockingly achieved the peak stage of the medium extreme. Even if he had the assistance of Ling Han's alchemical pills, as well as the reincarnation tree to assist in comprehension of Tao, this was still extremely shocking. It was as if the Rain Emperor was naturally born for martial arts, and the higher his cultivation level was, the more frightening his explosive burst was. Meanwhile, Feng Piyun, Ding Ping, and the others had just advanced into the medium extreme, and the gap between them and the Rain Emperor was becoming larger and larger. Shui Yinyu had also reached the peak stage of the high extreme. As for Hu Feiyun, since she was Empress Luan Xing's doppelganger, as long as she was willing to seriously cultivate, the rate at which she progressed was similarly shocking. She had already broken through to the peak stage of the consummate level, and could attempt to reach the pinnacle level. And the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm had finally opened as well. Chapter 1170, Death Valley. Chapter 1170, Death Valley. The Yellow Spring Mystery Realm was not on the heavenly Wind Mountain. Instead, it was in the Death Valley that was 100,000 miles away. It was still within the territory of the Majestic Heaven sect, but had been a forbidden area since several millennia ago. One should know just from hearing the name. This was the Death Valley. Death was the only fate of those who came in. It wasn't until Venerable Trinity came here and suppressed the inauspicious air of this place using his supreme techniques that the historical site buried beneath finally reappeared, allowing people to enter, explore, and obtain treasures. However, this ancient site was no training grounds. It was designed specifically for cultivators to foray into. This place should have been the abode of an elite, as it had frightening restrictions in place for protection. Venerable Trinity had indeed dispersed a part of the formation here, but could not completely do so. Hence, this place could only be visited once every 100 years because it was at such intervals that the might of the restrictions would be weakened the most. With Venerable Trinity in charge of opening the doors, entrance was finally only possible then. Even so, it could only accommodate the power of the Mountain River tier at most. If it was too strong, the restrictions would be triggered that would definitely not lead to a positive result. Even though Venerable Trinity had disposed of the inauspicious air of this place, it was filled with an eerie coldness. If it was not for the fact that the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm would be opened every 100 years, there would definitely be no one willing to come to this place. There were no flowers, plants, wild animals, nor birds. This was a completely barren place. A black aura was exuding from the whole valley. Its exact source could not be found, but it engulfed the whole valley, causing an urge to avoid it arise in people just from seeing it. No one wanted to come in contact with it. But now, this place was brimming with people. Some had still come here to try their luck, even if they had not gotten entrance slots from the Majestic Heaven sect. Ling Han's eyes swept over the gathered masses, and he saw a familiar person that he himself had not seen many times. Sha Yuan. Involuntarily, his eyes frosted over, a sliver of killing intent seeping into his gaze. This man coveted the treasure in his possession and had demanded it from him several times. After Ling Han had refused, the former had even sent out people to hunt him down and kill him. This enmity was one that Ling Han had never forgotten. Previously, even if Ling Han had wanted to take revenge, he could not find a chance. That was because Sha Yuan had reached the consummate level of Mountain River tier by himself and remained at the academy and the great General Sha's residence all day. How was he supposed to kill him then? But now? There was practically no change in Sha Yuan's cultivation, but Ling Han had already advanced into the pinnacle level of the Mountain River tier. Furthermore, this place was not Point Star City, but rather a mystery realm. Sha Yuan, you should repay your debt to me. So he is Sha Yuan? The Rain Emperor asked. He had heard Ling Han speak of how he had become enemies with Zhao Luan, Sha Yuan, and the others. Ling Han nodded and replied, That's him. Let us brothers join forces and kill him together. Murong Qing declared with burning killing intent. Even the strongest of the three of them had just barely advanced into the high extreme. There was still quite a distance from Sha Yuan's level. Even if the three of them joined forces, they could not possibly have a chance of winning. Ling Han shook his head and declared, He is mine. After entering into the mystery realm, we will move separately, the Rain Emperor said. Feng Piyun nodded as well. They were all brave and courageous characters, filled with confidence in themselves. They had no intention to continue living under Ling Han's protection. Ling Han knew he could not convince them otherwise, so he simply nodded and said, Be careful. He had given enough alchemical pills to his brothers, disciple, and Hellion Tianya. Furthermore, martial arts could not be improved with mere cultivation alone. Practical experience was similarly important. Han Lin, Hitao, Wu Jia, and 4 other young men and women with high reputation walked over. All around them, people stepped back, giving way to this group of 6. They were the 6 great king tiers of the Mountain River tier in the Majestic Heaven sect. They were invincible in the Mountain River tier, and after entering the Yellow Spring Mystery Realm, they would be truly invincible because Sun Moon tier elites could not enter. Who would be a match for these 6 king tiers? Of course, now, it was 7 king tiers. Ling Han nodded, then clasped his hands, and respectfully said, Greetings, everyone. They had met once before to discuss the matter of opening the treasure trove. Because the treasure trove was in the deepest parts of the mystery realm, and there were various fated opportunities on the way there, they could not possibly abandon everything else and head directly there. Thus, they had agreed to move separately before reaching the treasure trove. Wu Jia had swept away the embarrassment of his previous loss and recovered his strong confidence. Even when facing Ling Han again, he did not avoid his gaze. That should be about it. Very soon, an elite descended from the skies as if he was a heavenly emperor. There was endless divine light trailing behind him as if the heavens themselves were moving for him. Venerable Trinity. It's venerable. Many people called out, incredible reverence on their faces. In this galaxy, elites of the Eternal River tier were the strongest existence. Naturally, they were like true gods in everyone's hearts. However, no one could distinctly see the actual features of this elite. Endless divine light entwined around his whole body, so it could not be distinguished whether he was tall or short, man or woman. If it were not for the fact that they knew that there was only one elite of the Eternal River tier here, they would not have been able to guess his identity at all. Xiao, Xiao, Xiao. A great many other figures shot over, and they all stopped behind Venerable Trinity. Upon counting, there were a total of 24 figures. These were the 24 heavenly body tier elites of the Majestic Heaven sect. It looked like the operation today was extremely important if it caused all the elites of the Majestic Heaven sect to turn out in full strength. Ling Han's eyes swept over them. These 24 people did not disguise their faces and could be clearly seen. However, aside from Wei Ziqing, Ling Han did not recognize anyone else and merely memorized these people's faces. Venerable Trinity did not waste time on words and directly stretched out his hands. He began to channel a powerful mystical power, sweeping aside the black chi of this place. Though the wind that was blowing out of the valley was still eerily cold, it was much better now. This was a necessary step. Otherwise, if one directly stepped in, all those below the heavenly body tier would be completely eliminated. Venerable Trinity entered the valley. The 24 elites of the heavenly body tier assisted him from the sidelines, dealing with some scattered black chi, and the others followed behind him. All those who had received an entrance slot had been given a jade pendant. Before, it had been completely unnoticeable, but at this moment, it was now exuding a soft light, forming a halo, and protecting their owner within. There were some here to take advantage of the commotion. Naturally, they could not possibly possess a jade pendant. They appeared very obvious here. But what was strange was that the great elites of the Majestic Heaven sect looked to have no intention of chasing them away. Instead, they allowed them to mingle in with the crowd, much to their confusion. If the Majestic Heaven sect had no plans to take control of this mystery realm, what was the point of distributing entrance slots, then? After they had opened the mystery realm, wouldn't it be fine if they just allowed others to enter directly? But those who were here for the first time found out why very soon. "Ah!" someone shouted in agony as he collapsed onto the ground. He was twitching all over, appearing to be in great suffering. In a mere short moment, all his movements stopped, and all the life signs had vanished from him. He had actually died. Ling Han was surprised to had completely not discovered anything off. That person had just died for no conceivable reason. Since he had already cultivated to the immortal level, there was definitely no possibility of it being a strange illness, causing him to suddenly die. If there had to be anything unusual, that was that the dead man was a stowaway, and there was no flickering light of a jade pendant from him. Could it be that this was the reason? Chapter 1171, Flowers Fragrance. Chapter 1171, Flowers Fragrance. Ah! Yet another agonized wail cut through the air. More and more victims appeared, and without exception, these were all people who weren't being protected by the light from the jade pendants. No wonder the Majestic Heaven sect didn't pay attention to these stowaways. Even after eliminating the ominous aura of this place, those below the heavenly body tier would still be killed if they weren't suitably protected. Was the Majestic Heaven sect brutal? They were knowingly letting these people run to their deaths. Ling Han shook his head. This wasn't so much about brutality, but more about whether the Majestic Heaven sect cared or not. They were the #1 force in the galaxy. So did they need to care about other people's opinions? What a joke. Of course they didn't. Ling Han mulled over this problem as he walked. He had yet to reach the halfway mark, yet all of the stowaways had already died. They were merely at the mountain river tier, so how long could they last? Ling Han felt no sympathy for them. Exploring ancient sites was inherently dangerous, and everyone had to take responsibility for their own safety. If one wasn't smart enough or courageous enough to do so, then why were they coming to these ancient sites in the first place? Anyhow, Ling Han was curious about what had killed those people. He knew it was the black aura, but what exactly was that black aura? He used his mind to communicate with the Black Tower and ask Notionless Saint for answers. The Eternal River Tier elite whose body had been laid to rest here probably practiced some sinister cultivation technique, Notionless Saint said. As such, the surrounding areas have also been affected. Since Venerable Trinity couldn't fully eliminate the ominous aura, I can say with certainty that his cultivation level is far below that of the dead elite. Ling Han nodded in agreement. One elite was dead, and the other was alive, yet the latter still couldn't completely eliminate the formations of the elite who was dead. This indeed hinted at a large gulf in abilities. Everyone said that there were huge gulfs in abilities between those at the immortal level. This now was proof. Venerable Trinity was merely able to eliminate a portion of the ominous aura. Not only that, but he was only able to do so once every 100 years, when the might of the restriction reached its weakest point. It was only at such a time that he could forcefully open a path for others to enter. Of course, one couldn't underestimate Venerable Trinity because of this. After all, he was still the strongest elite of the galaxy. Regardless of what happened, elites still deserved respect. Everyone walked slowly as the rate at which the ominous black aura was being removed was incredibly slow. Even Venerable Trinity couldn't eliminate it any faster. Half a day passed, and they finally arrived at the foot of the valley. Venerable Trinity unleashed a supreme mystical power and ripped open a fissure in the sky. A dark passageway appeared. Through it, they could see a completely different land, one where the mountains were lush and the waters were clear. It made a stark contrast with the land they were currently in. More astonishingly, there was a river that was flowing from the sky. Neither its origin nor its end could be seen. It was like a heavenly river. The water of this river seemed eerie, and it radiated with a boundless aura of death. One could vaguely see countless wraiths squirming in the river. Although there was a passageway between them, Ling Han could still sense the terrifying and sinister nature of the river. "Is this the Yellow Spring one? You guys can enter now," Venerable Trinity said. There was a hint of exhaustion in his voice. He was an eternal river tier elite, yet there was actually a look exhaustion on his face. From this, it could be seen just how taxing eliminating the ominous aura and opening the passageway was. They all started to enter. Shwa, shwa, shwa. The cultivators became a blur as they dashed into the passageway. Pong! Someone followed the cultivators, yet they were suddenly blown into smithereens. It was a Sun-Moon tier elite who had forcefully suppressed his cultivation and tried to sneak in. He was only a step away from entering, and no one had come forward to stop him either. However, he was killed by the restriction that prevailed through this place. Those above the mountain river tier couldn't enter. This wasn't an empty warning. Ling Han entered with Shui Yinyu and the others, and they all felt a strong chill when they passed through the entrance. It was as if a wraith were whispering in their ears. Meanwhile, crashing waves surged through the Yellow Spring and caused deafening roars to reverberate in the surroundings. Everyone started to walk along the banks of the Yellow Spring. It was common knowledge that one would never get lost if they followed the banks of the Yellow Spring. "Fourth brother, let's part here." The Rain Emperor and the others bade farewell to Ling Han and each set off on their own path. In the end, only Ling Han, Shui Yinyu, and Hu Feiyun remained. "Let's go." Ling Han held Shui Yinyu's hand and started to walk off. "Wait for me." Hu Feiyun hurriedly ran after them as if she were afraid that Ling Han and Shui Yinyu would leave her behind. After walking for a while, Ling Han sniffed at the air and exclaimed, "It smells so nice." "Why you?" Shui Yinyu hit him lightly, thinking that he was teasing her. "Why are acting like this now? Can't you see that the Ninth King is also here? She's a clone of the Empress." Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "You misunderstood. I wasn't talking about the fragrance from your body, but rather the fragrance from some flower." "Really?" There was a hint of doubt on her face. This man would always tease her in new and different ways. Hu Feiyun hurriedly nodded and said, "I can also smell it. Let's go." Ling Han turned in a different direction. The Yellow Spring was a huge landmark, and it could be seen from almost anywhere. Thus, they didn't need to worry about getting lost. They followed the fragrance, and after walking for a while, they arrived before a small hill. There was a bright blossoming flower atop of this hill, and it was this flower that was exuding the soft and delicate fragrance. This fragrance wasn't concentrated, yet it could waft to extremely distant locations. The three of them weren't the first to detect this fragrance, and two other people had already arrived before them. However, they clearly weren't together, and they stood opposite each other with the flower between them. "Is this a godly medicine?" Ling Han didn't recognize this flower, and judging by the baffled look on Shui Yinyu's and Hu Feiyun's face, they didn't recognize it either. Meanwhile, what stopped them in their tracks was the piles of white bones that lay around the small hill. Some were humanoid, while others belonged to beasts. It was evident that many others had noticed this flower before them. However, those who had attempted to pluck it had all died. Ling Han wasn't sure about the value of this flower. However, the fact that so many humans and beasts had tried to pluck it gave him a reason to believe that this flower was incredibly valuable. Otherwise, why did so many people attempt to pluck it? Hang on. Is this a trap that takes advantage of one's intuition? When those who arrive later see that so many others have attempted to pluck the flower, they'll naturally think that this flower is a rare treasure. As such, it's extremely likely that they'll rashly head over. Such a beautiful flower. There was a dazed look in Shui Yinyu's eyes, and it was as if she were in a trance. She raised her leg and was just about to walk toward the small hill. Ling Han hurriedly pulled her back, a look of astonishment on his face. This flower could actually put one into a trance. However, the severity of this trance-like effect clearly differed from person to person. Neither he nor Hu Feiyun had been affected by it yet. Meanwhile, the other two people were already walking toward the flower. There was a glazed look in their eyes, yet their expressions were those of fervent excitement. It was as if they were gazing upon a supreme throne, not a mere flower. If they ascended this throne, they would become the ruler of the world, one who could control even saints. Swoosh! When the two people neared the small hill, a streak of black cloud suddenly rushed out from the hill and swooped toward them. Then, the black cloud instantly scattered and retreated back into the small hill. As for the two people, they had already become two skeletons. Pa! The skeletons collapsed to the ground, becoming the newest victims that adorned the surrounds of the small hill. So, that's how the people here have all died. Chapter 1172, Insects. Chapter 1172, Insects. Piles of white bones surrounded the small hill. Ling Han finally understood how they had died. They hadn't died from fighting over this flower, but rather they had been silently killed by the black cloud after being entranced by the flower. Ah! Shui Yinyu yelped in astonishment, a lingering fear still in her heart. If Ling Han hadn't pulled her back just then, she would have also become like the other two people. She would have walked over and been killed by the black cloud. What was that? She asked in a trembling voice. Ling Han shook his head and said, "It was too quick, I couldn't see it." Shui Yinyu was slightly surprised. Even Ling Han hadn't been able to see it clearly? That black cloud was truly uncanny. Ling Han thought for a moment and then casually tossed a black ball into the air. Ha, little Azura has come. The black ball expanded in the air, with arms and legs extending from its body. It eventually transformed into a large humanoid puppet. Wong! The black cloud flew out again, this time swooping toward the Azura Demon Emperor. Who are holy fuck? The Azura Demon Emperor was furious, but his angry shout quickly turned into a surprised cry. He immediately scuttled backward upon landing on the ground. The black cloud swarmed toward him as he ran away, and it eventually engulfed his body. Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun both yelped in surprise. This was because numerous pits had appeared in the Azura Demon Emperor's body. His left arm suffered the most, and it was as if it had been completely corroded. Only a tiny bit of the arm still hung from his elbow. The other parts of his body were only slightly better off. However, they were at least still intact. Master! There was an aggrieved look on the Azura Demon Emperor's face as he gazed at Ling Han. He didn't need to screw him over like this, did he? Ling Han ignored him and said, "That black cloud is formed from a swarm of countless insects. It's just that they're so small that they look like a black cloud when gathered together." Those were insects? The Azura Demon Emperor shook his devastated left arm as he jumped up and shouted, "What kind of teeth do they have? What kind of human can defend against them?" "You're not a human," Hu Feiyun pointed out. The Azura Demon Emperor, who was extremely shameless, said, "If Master's wife says I'm not a human, then I'm not a human. I'm actually a dog. Woof, woof. He dropped to the ground and started barking like a dog. Hu Feiyun giggled upon seeing this, and she didn't try to correct his way of referring to her. Are we still going to pluck that flower? Shui Yinyu asked. They had all retreated a fair distance back to avoid being entranced by the flower again. Although Ling Han and Hu Feiyun hadn't been affected last time, perhaps their stronger resistance was due to their relatively higher cultivation level. If they stayed near the flower for too long, it was possible that they could still be affected. Those insects mightn't be very strong, and maybe that's why they have to rely on the entrancing effects of the flower. Only after their victims are entranced do they fly out to feast on their flesh. However, their teeth are truly impressive. They devoured the 2 mountain river tier cultivators in a flash. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, even level 5 godly metal isn't strong enough to deal with them. They can still gnaw away at it, albeit with slightly more difficulty. The Azura Demon Emperor was proof of this. The puppet that he resided in had been forged from level 5 godly metal, yet his left arm had almost been completely obliterated. A confident smile appeared on Ling Han's face, and he said, let me try them out. Shui Yinyu was given a huge fright, and she shouted, you're crazy. Couldn't he see the wretched state of the Azura Demon Emperor? Let little Azura go, she added hurriedly. Milady, the Azura Demon Emperor wailed plaintively. It made sense that his master should stay away from danger, but that didn't mean that they should push him toward peril instead. Ling Han smiled and said, there's no need to worry. My physique is on par with level 5 godly metal now, and coupled with my insane recovery ability, these insects might be unable to threaten me. Anyhow, I wager that these insects don't have powerful defensive abilities. He hadn't sensed any origin power fluctuations from the black cloud, and this signified that the insects had either never cultivated before or had cultivation levels that were far above his. These were the only 2 possibilities. However, was the latter possible? If these insects were all at the Sun-Moon tier, perhaps even heavenly body tier elites could be killed by them. There was strength in numbers. When quantity reached a certain threshold, it would lead to a qualitative change. These insects were astonishingly quick, and they also possessed terrifying teeth. If their defenses were also powerful, then the heavens were being far too unfair. Shui Yinyu was familiar with Ling Han's personality, and she knew that he wouldn't change his mind easily. She could only nod and say, be careful, and be careful. She told him to be careful 3 times, revealing just how concerned she was for his safety. I will. Ling Han nodded and said, we still haven't made a child yet, so how can I bear to die? Go die. Shui Yinyu's face flushed red, and she couldn't help but push Ling Han. Ling Han clumsily charged toward the hill. Shui Yinyu was easily embarrassed, and she was unable to endure Ling Han's teasing even when it was just the 2 of them. That being the case, how could she not feel utterly embarrassed now that there were 2 outsiders beside them? A look of interest appeared on Hu Feiyun's face. Was there some adulterous affair between these 2 people? Meanwhile, the Azura Demon Emperor continued to crawl on all 4s and act like a dog. He used a hand to scratch his neck, and it was as if he were afraid of being killed and silenced. Ling Han continued to charge toward the hill. Wang. The hill immediately detected his presence, and the black cloud swarmed out once again. Ling Han humphed and said, I don't believe that your defenses are also incredible. With a thought, bursts of roaring flames surged from his body. Streaks of divine patterns were intertwined among the flames. Squeak! The black cloud instantly descended into chaos. It became like a headless fly, and the insects quickly separated into numerous smaller groups. The swarm of insects had been like a black cloud before, yet the smaller swarms were more like several squirming snakes now. However, there were also 1 or 2 swarms that found their direction and continued to swoop toward Ling Han. They eventually arrived before his body. Ling Han could clearly see that the black snake before him was formed from a swarm of countless insects. Each insect was incredibly tiny, yet they all had disproportionately humongous teeth. Not only that, but they were also unafraid of death. They clearly knew that Ling Han was bathed in flames, yet they still continued to charge toward him wave after wave. Squeak, squeak, squeak. The insects were burned to death one after another, yet they forcefully carved a path out and allowed even more insects to swarm onto Ling Han's body. They started to gnaw at his flesh. Ling Han humphed and unleashed his 7-kill subduing soul technique. Wong. The insects that were gnawing at his flesh were instantly stunned. In fact, most of their souls were immediately shattered into pieces. Only a small number of them managed to survive. Sure enough, these insects had very weak defenses even though they possessed incredible speed and terrifying teeth. Not only was their physical defense weak, but their divine sense defense was also weak. The heavens were indeed fair. These insects had been bestowed with unique abilities even though they hadn't cultivated at all. However, they also came with fatal weaknesses. It was because of this that they used that enchanting flower as bait. They would wait until their victim was entranced, then swoop over and instantly devour their flesh. However, Ling Han was prepared, so the outcome was completely different. After all, he was a king tier of the mountain river tier. Gasp! Ling Han bared his teeth in pain. Although he had killed most of the insects, there were still some that clutched onto his flesh with their humongous teeth, even though they were already dead or unconscious. It hurts. Chapter 1173, Misty Soul Capturing Flower. Chapter 1173, Misty Soul Capturing Flower. Not only were the teeth of these insects razor-sharp, but their saliva also contained a strange secretion that could induce severe pain in their victims. In fact, it could even paralyze their victims to a degree. Ling Han discovered that his body had become a little clumsy and inflexible. Moreover, the strange substance had entered his bloodstream and spread throughout his body, causing even his nerves to become slightly paralyzed. As a result, the might of his flames instantly dropped by a significant margin. The dazed and unconscious black snakes rapidly recovered and started to swoop toward him again. Ling Han channeled the indestructible heaven scroll, and a profound aura of heaven and earth circulated around his body. The progressing paralysis was instantly dispelled. He laughed loudly as he reignited the might of his flames. Ling Han drew his divine demon sword and said, "Let's see who's more powerful, hey." Boom. His divine demon sword also released a boundless flame. Flames worked extremely well against these insects. Wong. He continued to unleash his 7-kill subduing soul technique, and after another attack, a large number of insects dropped to the ground. Ling Han stowed them into his black tower. Perhaps these insects could become a secret weapon of his. Ling Han's wounds rapidly recovered as he channeled the indestructible heaven scroll. Although there was an occasional insect or two that breached his defenses and sunk their teeth into his flesh, such a small number of insects couldn't trouble him at all. They were too small, after all, and they were only terrifying if they swarmed in droves of thousands or even millions. If they did so, they would be able to devour a human in a flash. "Master, little Azura admires you so much," the Azura Demon Emperor said in flattery. He was residing in a puppet that was at the Sun-Moon tier, yet he had still been brutally defeated by the swarm of insects. However, Ling Han was currently enjoying an advantage over them. The contrast between them couldn't be more obvious. This wasn't to say that Ling Han was more powerful than Sun-Moon tier elites. Rather, this result signified that his abilities were more effective against these insects. His physique was freakish, and he also possessed an impressive recovery ability thanks to the indestructible heaven scroll. These qualities made him the most apt person to deal with these insects. Black clouds blotted out the sky, yet these insects had a clear area of activity that they definitely wouldn't fly out of. It was already impossible to see Ling Han's body. However, the others could still vaguely discern the flashes of flames among the black cloud. This signified that an intense battle was still raging on. However, the black cloud gradually faded as the battle dragged on. This was because large swathes of the insects were being killed or thrown into the black tower by Ling Han. Piles or insect corpses lay by his feet. Finally, no more insects swooped toward Ling Han. Instead, The last remaining insects all flew back to the small hill. The surroundings suddenly became silent. Ling Han gazed at the peculiar flower. Then, he stopped his breathing, closed all of the follicles on his body, and used the indestructible heaven scroll to guard his divine sense. His body started to emit a golden glow. Only then did he walk toward the flower. He didn't pluck the flower when he neared it, but instead started to dig around it. He dug the peculiar flower up along with its roots, and then placed it into his black tower. He only exited the black tower after planting the flower in a suitable location. Let's go. He didn't place the small hill into his black tower, as he had decided to give the black insects a slim chance at survival. The 3 people and 1 puppet continued forward. They didn't return to the bank of the Yellow Spring, as it would be fine as long as they continued in their current direction. There was no need for them to follow the riverbank. After tens of thousands of years of experience, one thing was for certain: one should definitely not enter the river. In fact, even the water in the river shouldn't be touched. Why was the river called the Yellow Spring? This wasn't simply because it looked eerie. That was genuinely a deadly river that would take one's life. If one came into contact with the river, they would die even if they didn't have any health complications. Meanwhile, their soul would be swallowed by the river and end up flowing through it for all eternity. Someone had tried to collect water from the Yellow Spring before, yet they had become a soulless corpse once they neared the river. This was a forbidden river, and it could only be used as a landmark. One definitely couldn't near it. Ling Han communicated through the Black Tower as he walked, and he asked Notionless Saint about the peculiar flower as well as the black insects. Might this be the Misty soul-capturing flower? Notionless Saint pondered for a moment before saying, "This is a peculiar plant that has no benefit to humans. However, its effects are extremely terrifying. In fact, it can even affect the mind of eternal river tier elites." Ling Han nodded and said, "This Misty soul-capturing flower isn't even able to affect me at the moment. Does this mean that it's still a fair way off from becoming mature?" "Most likely," Notionless Saint replied. "This Misty soul-capturing flower could have great effects if used properly." Ling Han had the Black Tower, so he could completely unleash this Misty soul-capturing flower and then hide back into the Black Tower. That way, he would be able to sow chaos among his enemies. However, this Misty soul-capturing flower was still far from becoming mature, and this was reflected in the fact that it could barely affect him. As such, it would definitely be useless against Sun-Moon tier elites. Even if it were somewhat effective, it would need a very long time to entrance them. "What about those insects?" Ling Han asked. "Those are saintly scarabs." There was a hint of astonishment in Notionless Saint's voice. Ling Han was puzzled, and he asked, "Those flesh-eating insects are referred to as saintly?" Notionless Sainter, rather the light orb that he had transformed into, flickered, as if it were experiencing some deep feeling. He remained silent for a while before saying, "It's because these insects emerge from the corpses of saints." Ling Han was surprised to hear this. Such strange insects would emerge from the corpses of saints. "This doesn't happen with every saint," Notionless Saint continued. "It depends on the great Tao that they've cultivated. Some might have saintly firebugs emerge from them, while others might have saintly iceworms emerge from them. Moreover, not all of the insects are this small in size. I've seen a saintly insect that was tens of thousands of meters in length. Its strength was profound, and even I didn't dare to battle against it." Tens of thousands of meters long? Can that still be classified as an insect? Since that's the case, it's possible that this is the abode of a saint, then? Ling Han asked. "Impossible." Notionless Saint instantly shot down Ling Han's speculation. If this was a saint's abode, how could a mere eternal river tier elite deal with the formations? Of course, this is unless the saint is purposefully allowing others to enter. It's more likely that the brat who owns this place found some saintly scarabs somewhere and slowly raised them in such a huge number. Moreover, if those were first-generation saintly scarabs, they would have been able to kill even eternal river tier elites. How could you have possibly taken them away? Ling Han nodded in understanding. He had also received some saintly scarabs now, so he could also slowly breed them. However, he needed to be extremely careful when raising these insects. If he lost control of them, they could potentially cause catastrophic damage. Saints were invincible in life, and they could still cause a huge commotion after death. However, there were two sides to a coin, and these saintly scarabs could benefit him greatly if used correctly. They stopped to set up a camp and rest after walking for a day. There was night and day in this place, though the difference between the two could only be determined by the brightness or darkness of the surroundings. There were no visible suns, moons, or stars. It was evident that Eternal River tier elites weren't powerful enough to capture suns to place them into this mystery realm. They had half a year's time. The restriction in this mystery realm would gradually become stronger again after this time passed. At that time, even Venerable Trinity wouldn't be able to open a passageway. Thus, they had to return to the entrance before half a year passed. When the time limit expired, Venerable Trinity would open another passageway to let everyone who had entered out. They had to plan their time well. If they missed their opportunity to leave, they would be killed by the restriction that became stronger by the day. They had never heard of anyone surviving until the next 100 years. Chapter 1174, Being Nosy. Chapter 1174, Being Nosy. Huh? Why did Sister Shui suddenly disappear last night? Hu Feiyun asked with a strange expression the next morning. Shui Yinyu was eating at that moment, and she instantly started to cough upon hearing this. She then glared at Ling Han with fury. It was all his fault. He had called her over in the middle of the night to do those shameful things. Ling Han smiled and said, "Children shouldn't ask too many questions. Concentrate on eating your breakfast." Hu Feiyun puffed her cheeks. Why did they all treat her like a child? Big sister did so, and Ling Han was also doing so right now. This made her very angry. After breakfast, they continued on their way. This place didn't only contain eerie things like the Misty soul-capturing flower and saintly scarabs, but also contained all kinds of godly medicine and treasures. If this weren't the case, the Misty soul-capturing flower wouldn't have attracted so many people in the first place. The reason it had attracted so many people was because everyone thought it was a kind of godly medicine. They discovered several godly medicines as they walked, yet it was a pity that they had come too late and the godly medicines had already been plucked. Some people had been rough, and they even destroyed the roots of the godly medicines when they plucked them away. However, some people had been relatively careful, and they took care to leave the roots intact when they plucked the godly medicines. This way, they could return to pluck the godly medicines again after 1 century, 2 centuries, or even more centuries. Ling Han didn't beat around the bush, and he dug up all the roots that he saw and tossed them into the Black Tower. The effects of these godly medicines would be maximized if they were placed in the Black Tower. The smile on Ling Han's face grew wider and wider. His harvest was truly bountiful. If he could reap such a yield every day, this trip would already be worth it. However, his luck was fluctuating. In some days he would come across 7 or 8 godly medicines, while on other days he would come across absolutely nothing. 7 days passed by in the blink of an eye. Ding, 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 ding. The sound of clashing weapons traveled over from the distance. In fact, they could even see bursts of divine light soaring into the sky. It was clear that an intense battle was raging in the distance. Hu Feiyun's interest was piqued, and she said, "Let's check it out." Shui Yinyu, who wasn't as curious as Hu Feiyun, said, "It's best that we keep our noses out of other people's matters." However, Hu Feiyun was already running toward the location of the battle, an excited expression on her face. They hadn't experienced any battles during the past 7 days, and thus the 9th king, who was extremely lively, was already barely able to contain herself. Ling Han and Shui Yinyu exchanged a glance. They had no choice but to run after Hu Feiyun. However, they weren't afraid, either, as Sun-Moon tier elites weren't able to enter this mystery realm. Ling Han was almost invincible, so at least they didn't need to worry about their safety. There was a field of scattered rocks before them, and after passing through it, the 2 battling parties appeared in their vision. One group had 7 people, and the other group was even larger, with 25 people. The larger group had formed an encirclement and trapped the group of 7 inside. Hand the 9-layer divine lotus over, and we can spare your lives, a member of the encircling group said. Boolsh *T. There was a seductive red-haired beauty among the trapped group of 7, and she was dressed in a particularly revealing manner. She was wearing a shoulderless upper armor that left her jade-like arms revealed, and in fact, even a portion of her voluptuous breasts could still be seen. Her lower armor only reached halfway down her thighs as well, and her long and slender legs were clear for all to see. However, her skin wasn't white, but rather a tanned wheat color. An astonishing vitality radiated from her body, and she seemed much like a female leopard. She humphed and continued, "You guys haven't attempted to kill us only because you're afraid that we'll destroy the 9-layer divine lotus. However, you'll definitely kill us once we hand it over." Ha 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 ha. The encircling group roared with laughter. "There's no need to worry, Leader Meng. The others will die, but you definitely won't." Another person chuckled lewdly and said, "I've heard about Leader Meng's beauty for a long time. Won't it be a massive waste if we can't taste Leader Meng's body?" Hee hee hee. Ha ha ha. The members of the encircling group all laughed wantonly. This mystery realm was huge, so it was almost impossible for others to discover their depraved acts. Even if someone did, they could simply kill them along with the victims. How detestable! Hu Feiyun couldn't watch on, and she drew her sword as she charged out, shouting, "Evil villains, eat my sword." The encircling group faltered slightly upon seeing her charge out by herself. After a moment, however, they all broke into laughter. She was just a young lady, so wasn't she charging into a lion's den? It's another beautiful woman. Just what we needed. There's only one Leader Meng, so how long would we have needed to line up for? Even if 3 of us do her at the same time, we'll still need to wait for 7 rounds. Now that there's another beautiful woman, we'll only need to wait for 3 rounds. Huh? Look over there, boss. There's another stunning beauty. Their gazes turned to Shui Yinyu, and they couldn't help but drool in excitement. This woman was even more beautiful than the other 2. Moreover, her seductive nature was one that could suck one's soul. They would be willing to sacrifice 100 years of their life just to do this stunning beauty once. Ayo! They all howled in lustful excitement. Heh, you guys are dreaming. Ling Han arrived before them in a flash and calmly said, "I can spare your lives if you guys fuck off by yourselves." Ling Han wasn't a bloodthirsty person, and he didn't know what had happened between these 2 groups of people either. Thus, he didn't want to massacre them. A sturdy man who was around 30 years old walked over and said, "Brat, you're quite arrogant, aren't you?" His clothes were unbuttoned, revealing his large and round belly. His face was full of pudgy flesh, and he was currently holding a large saber. Strong killing intent radiated from his body. "Thanks for your help, handsome guy. However, these people aren't easy to deal with. It's best that you take this chance to escape," the red-haired beauty shouted. "You've already stuck your nose into this matter, so how can you leave now?" a member of the encircling group said with a sneer. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, "You're nothing but a bunch of weaklings. What are you acting so smug for? You're seeking death." A cold glint flashed across the big-bellied man's eyes, and he seized the opportunity while Ling Han was talking to leap over and slash at him. He used his full strength, and divine light radiated from his saber as divine patterns intertwined in the surrounding air. A frosty aura surged toward Ling Han. Pooh! There was a flash, and the divine demon sword had already appeared and slashed outward, shattering the saber into pieces. The divine demon sword didn't stop, instead continuing on its trajectory and slashing the big-bellied man into 2. Intestines burst into the air as blood sprayed everywhere. Gasp! Everyone was stunned. They were petrified by the power of his sword. It was far too terrifying. How could the might of his sword be so domineering? Wang! The divine demon sword hovered beside Ling Han, not a drop of blood on its blade. However, a frightening murderous aura radiated from its body. Following the elevation of its level, the might that radiated from this divine sword was also becoming increasingly devastating. One had to realize that devouring metal could evolve to become divine metal. Even if it hadn't reached that level yet, it was still many times more powerful than ordinary godly metal. The encircling group didn't dare to underestimate Ling Han any longer. One of them solemnly asked, "Sir, you are?" The members of this group all robbed others for a living, and they had spent some money as well as robbed some others to obtain the jade pendants needed for entering this mystery realm. They had obtained enough jade pendants for 25 members to enter. None of them could be considered a prodigy, yet after countless years of cultivation, all of them had reached the consummate level of the mountain river tier. In their minds, they would be invincible as long as they worked together. However, Ling Han had killed one of them with a single stroke of his sword. This put them on edge, and they finally realized that such kinds of powerful prodigies genuinely existed in the world. The profound might of Ling Han's battle prowess was far beyond their imagination. Chapter 1175, Cooperation. Chapter 1175, Cooperation. Ling Han swept his gaze over the encircling group and said, "You people don't have the right to know my name. Boss, there's no need to speak nonsense with him. Kill him." One of the evil villains shouted. He seemed extremely haughty. The villain boss hesitated for a moment before retrieving a vial of pills. However, he didn't open the vial, instead saying, "Sir, it's not too late for you to leave now. However, you have to leave these two women." He pointed at Shui Yinyu and Hu Feiyun. Upon seeing the killing intent on Ling Han's face, he immediately raised the vial in his hand and said, "Do you know what these are? These are purple pattern mountain river pills, and they can raise my battle prowess by 3 stars. My cultivation level is already at the peak stage of the consummate level of the mountain river tier. After raising my battle prowess by another 3 stars, do you really think you'll be any match for me?" He had spent a fortune on this vial of pills, which only contained 2 pills in total. Thus, he didn't want to use them if he didn't have to. This was his trump card, and it was much more effective as a threat than if he genuinely ingested them. Ling Han couldn't help but chuckle. He truly couldn't hold his laughter back. He shook his head and said, "Say, how ignorant do you have to be to think that raising your battle prowess by 3 stars will make you invincible in the mountain river tier? You dare to belittle me?" The villain boss roared in anger. Ling Han raised a hand. Wong. A formidable aura crushed down, and the villain boss's face instantly became as white as a sheet. He didn't dare to move even a pinky. The pinnacle level of the mountain river tier. How incredibly mighty was this? It was only natural that Ling Han could easily crush someone at the consummate level of the mountain river tier. Moreover, the villain boss was only an ordinary mountain river tier cultivator, and he couldn't even be considered a 1-star genius. The gulf in power between them was like night and day. Ling Han casually extended his hand and grabbed the vial of pills. He then smiled and said, "It'll be a huge waste if you were to ingest these pills. It's better if I sell them for some money. I can probably buy a tail one of level 4 godly metal for it." The villains were all transfixed with shock. Their boss had actually been defeated with a single move. Although the big-bellied man had been sliced into 2, they could have said that he'd been careless, or that his opponent's sword was far too powerful. However, what excuse did they have now? They trembled uncontrollably as terror gripped at their hearts. Spare me." The villain boss instantly discarded his dignity and started to beg for his life. He was a realist. An eerie killing intent appeared on Ling Han's face, and he said, "Didn't you want me to leave the women?" The villain boss shook his head frantically and stuttered, "No, I wouldn't dare to." "Heh, that's because I'm powerful enough. If I had been weaker than you, my women would have become your playthings," Ling Han said calmly. Hu Feiyun raised her hand in protest and said, "Ling Han, I'm not your woman." Ling Han sighed and said, "Can't you see that I'm showing off my brilliant might right now? Did you really have to interrupt me and ruin the atmosphere?" "Oh," Hu Feiyun nodded weakly as she lowered her head and started to twiddle her fingers. "I'm not a bloodthirsty person, but it's a shame that I can't see any redeeming features in you people. There's no reason for me to be sympathetic." Ling Han raised his right hand, and the divine demon sword moved along with his actions. The tip of the divine demon sword hovered over the villains' bodies. We've no option but to fight him. The villains weren't stupid, and they all prepared to battle upon realizing that Ling Han had no intention of letting them off. They would battle to the death. If there were even a sliver of hope, these people would even stoop as low as to pretend to be a subservient lackey. However, if all avenues to life were severed, they would become ferocious madmen who fought to their very last breath. They definitely wouldn't lie down and accept death. They turned their attention away from the red-haired beauty and her group and all charged toward Ling Han. Either Ling Han died, or they died. Ling Han smiled coldly as he unclasped a hand. Shio, shio, shio. 24 streaks of divine light shot out. Pu, 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 pu. The heads of the 24 villains instantly exploded. Their deaths were swift and violent. The red-haired beauty and the other 6 members of her group were all stunned, looks of sheer disbelief on their faces as they stared at Ling Han. What kind of freakish battle prowess was this? Weren't Sun-Moon tier elites not allowed to enter this mystery realm? However, was Ling Han's battle prowess not at the Sun-Moon tier? Those 24 villains were at the consummate level of the Mountain River tier. Yet, they had been insta-killed just like that? Who could believe this? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "No need to thank me." He grabbed Shui Yinyu's hand and started to walk off. Hu Feiyun faltered for a moment before hurriedly running after them and shouting, "Wait for me!" Oi, oi, oi. The red-haired beauty also came to her senses, and she immediately sprinted after Ling Han and the others. "Handsome guy, why are you leaving so quickly? Are you scared that I'll bite?" She winked at Ling Han as she said this. Ling Han was slightly astonished. This woman seemed fairly laid back for someone who had almost been killed just then. In fact, she was even in high enough spirits to wink at him. "Are you okay?" Shui Yinyu asked. Sigh. The red-haired beauty sighed before saying, "Our losses were truly great this time." She immediately started to recount the events, not caring whether Ling Han and the others were interested. As it turned out, they were a mercenary group that accepted money to complete missions. However, they weren't hired for a job this time, and had instead paid a fortune to enter this mystery realm. Their target was a treasure storage that existed inside this mystery realm. They had discovered this treasure storage on a mission to enter with and protect someone. However, many members of their mercenary group had died, and even the person who had hired them lost their life. Even so, they still yearned to enter that treasure storage. Thus, they spent a fortune to enter this mystery realm again. However, they discovered a 9-layer divine lotus on their way, and they only managed to obtain it after sacrificing 4 members of their group while fighting the demonic beast that guarded it. They were extremely unfortunate, though, and the group of villains had noticed and targeted them. If it weren't for the fact that the villains were afraid of them going all out and even destroying the 9-layer divine lotus, the red-haired beauty and her group definitely wouldn't have survived until Ling Han and the others came. "Handsome guy, you're so powerful. Why don't we team up and cooperate?" The red-haired beauty invited them to work together. "Oh, that's right. My name is Wei Mingwei. Are we really teaming up to find treasures?" Ling Han grumbled in his mind. "It looks like you want to gobble me up. How does 50-50 sound?" Meng Wei was extremely enthusiastic, and she continued, "Although you're strong, we're the ones who are providing the location of the treasure storage. So, splitting the treasures 50-50 isn't too greedy on our part, right?" Ling Han sighed and said, "I still haven't accepted your invitation yet." Meng Wei laughed loudly and said, "It's okay. I'm sure you'll accept my invitation after considering it for a while." She didn't seem to mind that her breasts were undulating as she laughed. It was almost as if her breasts were about to jump out from her armor. Ling Han's expression became serious, and he asked, "What treasure storage is this? Do you mind telling me?" Meng Wei's expression was as if she expected this answer. That place was probably the abode of an alchemist, so there are heaps of alchemical pills. Perhaps there are even some pill recipes. If we make copies of the pill recipes, we'll definitely make huge fortunes selling them. Ling Han's eyes lit up. He was absorbed by the word alchemist. He nodded and said, "Fine, let's work together. We'll split the alchemical pills evenly, and we'll each make a copy of any pill recipe we find." "Deal." Meng Wei extended her hand. Ling Han slapped her hand lightly, and the two of them sealed their deal. They set off toward the abode of the alchemist. However, they decided to rest when night fell so that they could recover their energy. The red-haired beauty and her group had just experienced an intense battle. After all, Chapter 1176, Mind if I sleep with you? Chapter 1176, Mind if I sleep with you? After convincing Hu Feiyun to leave, Ling Han wrapped his arms around Shui Yinyu and prepared to get some rest. There were outsiders nearby, after all, so it would be a bad idea to enter the Black Tower and risk exposing the secret of his spatial god tool. With a swoosh, Meng Wei entered their tent as she pulled the entrance aside. She was wearing a bright red cloak, and it was evident that she had only just washed her hair. There were still beads of water dripping down her silky red hair, radiating a peculiar type of allure. "Leader Meng, it's already so late. For what reason do you come?" Ling Han asked. There was slight irritation in his voice. Meng Wei had come without invitation, and she hadn't even asked before entering. She was acting far too familiar. "You can't do as you please, even if you're a woman, and even if you're a beauty." "Guys, mind if I sleep with you?" Meng Wei asked them a shocking question. "Pooh." Ling Han instantly spluttered aloud. Thankfully, he and Shui Yinyu had been together this entire time. Otherwise, she would have definitely interrogated him on his relationship with Meng Wei. Shui Yinyu was also astonished, and she asked, "Sister Meng, are you drunk?" There was a puzzled look on Meng Wei's face, and she said, "Why are you two so surprised? Have you two not made love before?" Was this woman trying to shock them to death? Shui Yinyu was extremely embarrassed, and she buried her head into Ling Han's back, not daring to look at anyone else. Ling Han was naturally thick-skinned enough, and he said, "Leader Meng, what are you trying to say? I battled for an entire day, and several of my good comrades died. I'm feeling extremely down right now, so I want to let myself loose." There was an alluring look in Meng Wei's eyes as she gazed at Ling Han, and she continued, "Don't think that I'm casual about my partners. Although I won't guard my chastity as if it's pure jade, I'll only make love with men that I truly think are worthy." Is this not casual? Shui Yinyu was already completely dumbfounded. This woman was far too bold. "Your expressions are so strange. Do you think that women get the short end of the stick when they fuck men?" Meng Wei chuckled in scorn and said, "It's fine as long as I feel good. It's not like I'll get pregnant or anything, and we can both go our own ways after rooting. Neither of us will owe each other anything." This made some sense. However, in this world where beautiful women were often treated as a commodity, people still held onto the traditional belief that men would definitely be better off when making love with women. Women would definitely get the short end of the stick. Ling Han wouldn't interfere with others' habits as long as they didn't affect him. "Leader Meng, I think it'll be better if you seek your own comrades to let yourself loose." "Tisk, rabbits don't eat the grass by their burrows." Meng Wei waved her hand and said, "When I screw a man, we'll only be together for a maximum of 10 days to half a month. We'll never see each other again after that. So, how can I screw my own comrades? How will I leave them by my side after I screw them?" Ling Han grimaced upon hearing this. This was the first time he had come across such a woman, and he was truly at a loss for words. "Oi, want to see my wares?" Meng Wei asked. She undid her cloak and slipped out of it, revealing her beautiful and seductive naked body. Large breasts, flat stomach, shapely bottom, and long and slender legs. This was truly a flawless and alluring body. However, there were many scars on her body, and it was clear that some had been left numerous years ago. They hadn't disappeared over time. These scars had formed due to the foreign martial intents that had remained in her wounds while they healed. Because of their existence, her wounds hadn't been able to heal completely. Ling Han was astonished that there were so many scars on the body of a stunning beauty such as Meng Wei. It was quite a startling scene. Meng Wei proudly puffed her chest and confidently said, "How is it? My figure is quite nice, isn't it? Ling Han waved his hands and said, I'm sorry, but I don't have a habit of getting together with my cooperation partners. He wasn't faking seriousness. In fact, he was genuinely uninterested in having one-night stands. Ling Han had never seen himself as someone who was loyal to only one partner, but he wouldn't make love with someone just for the sake of short-term pleasure. Then I can only concede and take the next best option. Meng Wei turned her gaze to Shui Yinyu and said, Girl, I'll teach you how to make love with women. Believe me, my techniques are definitely no worse than your man's. I guarantee that you'll experience an incredible pleasure. Fuck, you're even trying to steal my woman? Ling Han was extremely ticked off, and he immediately walked over and grabbed Meng Wei by the neck. Oi, 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 I only accept normal lovemaking. You're being too rough, and I don't like that. Ow. Meng Wei shouted loudly as she was thrown out of the tent by Ling Han. She plopped to the ground on her rear. Haha, leader, you were rejected, huh? I said so, didn't I? He has 2 breathtakingly beautiful wives, so how could he possibly have been seduced by our leader? However, he rejected a threesome that was delivered to his door. It looks like young Master Han's standards are pretty high, huh? Meng Wei's subordinates all roared with laughter. It was evident that they were all well aware of their leader's bad habits. What do you guys mean? Are you trying to say that I'm not classy enough? Meng Wei slipped back into her cloak and continued to speak without restraint. Her subordinates all giggled in secret. They had gone through thick and thin with Meng Wei, so it could be said that they were like true brothers and sisters. Thus, they naturally didn't fear her too much, nor did they overly respect her. However, they were all willing to die for her. At least half of the scars on her body had been left during the times that she had saved them. She continued to curse and vent her emotions. Her desire hadn't been satisfied, so she was naturally very unhappy. After cursing for a while, she shouted, I'll deal with it myself. She then immediately returned to her own tent. Shui Yinyu's face flushed red, and she buried it in Ling Han's lap, murmuring, How can there be such people? Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Would you still say this if Meng Wei were a man? Shui Yinyu pondered for a moment before replying, Although that would still seem a little too casual, I guess it wouldn't be overly astonishing. Ling Han nodded and said, Indeed, why is such behavior regarded as normal for men, yet women are criticized for doing the same thing? Shui Yinyu's views naturally couldn't be changed so quickly. She simply shook her head and said, Anyhow, I can't accept such behavior. Of course, you already have a flawless husband in me, so how can you seek out other men? Ling Han smiled as he pulled her into his embrace and enjoyed her beauty and warmth. Pay! This man really couldn't say anything nice. Morning arrived, and they continued toward the alchemist's abode. Although they had experienced that awkward situation last night, it didn't seem like Meng Wei had taken it to heart. Sure enough, she was extremely thick-skinned. If this hadn't been the case, she wouldn't have run before an unfamiliar male, stripped naked, and asked to make love anyway. Meng Wei wasn't embarrassed, yet Shui Yinyu's face flushed red every time she saw her. She was teased incessantly by that open and casual woman. They ventured further and further from the yellow spring. After walking for several more days, a small manor appeared before them. Be careful, Meng Wei warned. We came across a pack of demonic beasts the last time we came here, and we were forced to abandon our armor and retreat. In the end, we only managed to explore a very small area. Ling Han was slightly puzzled and asked, How do you know there are pills in here if you weren't able to explore its depths last time? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.